By the way, my mic is like you. It's not too quiet, not
No,
too loud.
not on the call, but it might be on the stream later. Who knows? We'll find out later. Um,
Fair, fair,
are we
fair.
live? Are we live?
It does say that we are.
Excellent. Let's start the show. Intro time. Welcome to the Spur of the Moment podcast. I, as always, is your host, Justin Spurr, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, the incomparable Jordan. How are you today, Jordan?
Sleepy.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, it was a long week. A
It
long
was a
week.
busy, busy, long, tiring week.
So today, the news is going to be kind of funky because I've got a lot, but I don't think we're going to get much substance out of it. So there's a Bob the Builder movie coming. They're making a second
Really?
Leo. We're gonna talk
What?
about.
There's a first Leo. What's Leo?
We'll talk about it. And they're re-releasing Final Fantasy. And
I
other
get.
stuff. Um, and then later on in the show with book reports, we are going to be talking about directors. We have each selected a famous director, and we will be talking about their filmography a little bit, sprinkling in stuff we haven't seen with stuff we have seen. But we'll get to that later. To start off with, um, they're making apparently there's a Bob the Builder animated movie in the works. It's gonna star hmm, I could say his name, but I don't know that you're gonna know him by name. Anthony Ramos? No.
No,
You've seen
means nothing to me.
you've seen Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
Um, he plays his son, Hamilton's son,
Okay.
and he's the
Okay.
main guy in the newest Transformers movie.
Okay. Interesting.
It's an animated movie, so I guess it's he's gonna do the voice, and it's gonna be about it's Roberto, aka Bob, is going to go to Puerto Rico for some major construction job, and then he's gonna get into shenanigans and learn things about Caribbean culture and whatnot. So
So
like,
I'm not fully up to date on my Bob the Builder media, but I feel like there's been a movie already. Has there not been a movie?
honestly, you know what? Let's find out. I think so. I think there has
Like,
been. I feel like there has been a
like I
while. Now
just
that you
I
said that.
feel like there has been. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it was just like a short or something, but like an
Yeah.
hour long thing.
According to this, yeah, yeah, there was. Wow, it does
Okay.
not look like Bob the Builder. It was called Bob the Builder Mega Machines. So I don't know, but that doesn't really. This doesn't really. I mean, I don't know. I don't have children, and I was obviously way older than that. But like, I mean, is it gonna be in the style of? How is that gonna work? Or are they gonna change? I just don't. Is this gonna be one of those like big theatrical, like harken back to that blank the movie where it's like this is what the show is like with a bigger budget?
Or is it gonna be like completely breaking what the show is like and like try to be like the gritty backstory, not gritty backstory,
Yeah,
but like
like a hardened
kids
backstory.
version.
Yeah,
Yeah, kids version of a gritty backstory.
I don't
Um,
know.
like I'm not. That was sort of a after my time kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly
So
same. Yeah, it's way younger than me, way after my time.
yeah,
So I don't know much about it to be like, yay, I
I just say
guess.
he's a general presence. I know
Yeah,
Bob the Builder. Can he fix it? Bob the Builder, and that's enough.
and that's enough. Any more than that
Um,
would be too much. But yeah, and it's like
any more than that might fall into copyright
that is
territory,
true.
and
We could just not
we
no
do not want to.
no.
No, we're just gonna avoid
Um,
that whole thing.
so Leo is that movie I told you about. It's the animated movie with Adam Sandler. It was a Netflix movie, and it's he's the
Oh
talking lizard.
yeah,
It's really good.
right. I remember you mentioning that. I never got the opportunity to watch because we don't have Netflix.
Yeah, I may have circumvented that. But it's really good. It's quite good. It's one of those like you see the trailer and you're like, oh, it's gonna get old and annoying, and it honestly doesn't. It's cute and it's funny, and I think I mentioned it in one of my best of. I think I said it was the best animated movie last year, and I still maintain that. I mean, maybe other than Spider Man. Um,
Spiderman? Dave
Spinman.
Spiderman?
We're gonna talk about Oscars. Should I have lumped Oscar nominations? We'll talk about Oscar nominations closer to the Oscars because I disagree with some choices. There may be an Oscar special coming soon. But no, to hear that's getting a sequel, that's great. That was one of those movies I was like, give this it needs a franchise. Like there should be
I'm not
like
sure.
there should be at least 3 of these. Oh yeah, apparently Matthew Vaughn he has given an update on Kingsman 3, which apparently is happening, which is exciting, and it's not. I think it's an actual sequel. I don't think it's a sequel. Oh no, it's because I had heard that they were doing a sequel to the Kingsman,
The
the
King's
prequel.
Man. The
Yeah, the
King's
King's Man,
Man.
where they fought Hitler. You remember at the end of the last one when Hitler walks out like he's a MCU style villain post credit scene.
All I remember of that one was
That was
very
good.
forgettable to me. All
That's
I
a good one.
remember of that one was being like, this doesn't feel like the Kingsman that I fell in love with, and I didn't really like it as
Yeah, a lot of
much.
people felt I love that movie. That movie was really good. But a
Like
lot of people felt that way.
I really liked the first two Kingsmen, and it was like a parody of the spy stuff. Like it was really funny and fun,
The general
and then
consensus
that
on it
just wasn't.
the general consensus on it was I like Kingsman 2, but a lot of people didn't like Kingsman 2. And a lot of people like not as good as Kingsman 1, better than Kingsman 2, which I don't necessarily agree with. I quite like Kingsman
I
2.
mean, I do think the first one really nailed it on the
Yeah,
head, and like once you get past that him training to be a spy thing, and he's just a spy, it's like, well, the charm of the first movie was him learning to be the spy. That was
exactly.
kind of once you're past that hurdle, what do you do exactly?
Um,
He has to be competent at his job, or he would no longer be a spy.
I don't know though. I'm kind of into the Kingsman fight Hitler, and it's like it's the Kingsman style action movie, but he's fighting Hitler. That sounds. But no, apparently yeah, they are making a third one. And I think he said that he has, um, yeah, he wants to get it done before the other guys get too old. But apparently he's got the beginning and the ending, and he's currently working out the middle.
Interesting,
Yeah,
interesting.
yes, I'm interested in that. I don't know what they do for a continuation of um
To me, I see that a third one as a prequel for that, where it's like it's about the mentor figure and his dad and stuff, and like the backstory and all that. But
Sorry, I'm just
that's me.
some of these articles I didn't actually read. So apparently there's a Dungeons and Dragons VR game in the works, and I was just reading through the article because I'm like, wait, is it like a VR game of your like Baldur's Gate style? You're in the world, you create characters, an RPG, or is it like a VR game where where you're VR role playing as a player and you roll dice in VR? Because that's also in its own kind
that
of
that
way would kind
that
of
would
be
be
fun.
fun.
Yeah,
To me, that would be the evolution of the like you can't go and play with your friends in person,
yeah.
and you don't want to do the video chat, so then you do the VR version
I
instead.
do kind of think that I don't think anyone's ever done a simulation of like doing a game that's like it's a game in a game where it's like you're playing a player who's playing D&D, because I'm not gonna lie, it'd be kind of fun to like build a meta party like like you
Yeah,
know what I mean, like have here's the
yeah.
guy who here's your, if you're a Critical Role fan, because I'm currently watching Critical Role, here's your Orion, or here's your Tiberius, like the guy who thinks he knows, and like you can swap out different archetypes
Um,
of a D&D player. I think that'd be kind of fun. I don't know why. I don't know why that
uh,
amuses me.
but for the VR idea there of having it and all that, there is to step away from the D&D real quick. There are VR games where it's like you're playing like old like box screen television, and it's
Yeah,
got the
yeah, I've seen
emulator,
those.
and like you're playing the video game and you can decorate your room however you
I've
want.
seen
So to
those, yeah.
take that idea and turn it into you're sitting there playing D&D with your friends,
Yeah.
I absolutely see that as
That
a
would be
thing.
fun.
That would be a fun,
That would be
even
so
if it's
fun.
like you're playing with like generated characters, like that could be fun too. But
Yeah.
I could see there's got to be a person who's smart enough to make it where you're literally just playing D&D with your
It's someone's
friends.
kitchen, yeah, at a kitchen
Like
table, yeah, there's gotta be.
there's got to be someone who could do that.
There's gotta be. But I was funny. I kept this article because it sprung me into this idea that I've been kind of thinking about, where like, I don't know what it would be, if it's a game, a show, a movie, a TV show, but like I thought about the idea of having like a D&D story where the bad guy is a DM, like a demented, like godlike figure that can like just control the world at whim and like force them to like to you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
have a bad
yeah.
guy who's like it's like basically the analog or avatar of a DM. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of a fun story.
That would be fun as okay, for one thing, that's just literally you are the DM and you could make that a story for Dungeons and
Yeah, I
Dragons.
know.
Um but that would be a fun game, like a video
Right?
game.
Right?
I see that as a video game which is very meta
Yeah.
and like is very like Stanley Parable or
Yeah.
like one of those style of games where it's like it's a game within a game within a game within a game and
Yeah.
like that kind of scenario. But absolutely that sounds like a very fun indie game
Right? Right? Or I'm like, oh, or even like I like that as like a
or
um
a show.
yeah, to
I
be
could see it
fair,
as a show.
watching Critical Role has made me go like, I would. There's so many characters in this show. And I don't want to go into a huge diatribe about Critical Role, but
Oh, we could absolutely. You want to do that, Luke?
there's so
I'm
many
down.
characters in that show that I'm like they deserve their own spin-off. Like
Oh, there's spin-offs on spin-offs for those
my
characters.
right now it's like I want to see a spin-off with Felicia Day's character because I'm like and the other Mary. I'm like they're great. Um, but I think that's fun.
Or Will Friedle's character and the other
Oh
character
yeah,
with the Slayers.
I'm
Like
getting
they
onto
could have their own spin-off too.
I'm getting to the next episode with Will Friedle and Will Wheaton. And it's so funny because in the beginning of the episode they're doing all these shit dice rolls, and it's like oh no. The game knows that Will Wheaton is coming next week. The Will Wheaton dice curse has started already, and I'm like, it's a prelude to next week. There's no way he's gonna roll some horrendous rolls. I'm so excited.
At one point in the episode, basically, from what I remember, I can't remember if he says to one of them, like, "Don't let me touch your dice, or you'll never want to use them again,"
Yeah,
or if one of them makes the joke about it. I can't remember, but
and the one I'm on
the
now,
joke is definitely touched on.
the one I'm
Very
in there
funny.
now, where someone who rolls the dice and Matt Mercer goes it's the Wheaton you're Will Wheaton and she goes shh. um anyway Deadpool 3 apparently they're done they've wrapped production which means they're now in post production which like wow so yeah that's definitely coming next year.
They really pushed that out,
Well
eh?
yeah once the strike ended well I mean they were like mid production when the strike hit so it was like it would have been out probably earlier. I think they had to push back, but I mean,
Yeah.
I've tried to avoid. It's with the way leak culture is nowadays. It's so hard to avoid. But I've been trying so hard to avoid it.
I mean,
But I saw a
you
really
just
fun.
you want to avoid spoilers. You just gotta quit the
Yeah,
TikToks.
I know.
I don't really use the TikToks, and I don't really have to deal with these things.
But there's a really fun. There is one fun one I saw where it's Wolverine and Deadpool are like walking along, and Deadpool jumps on his back and like wraps his arms around him, and Wolverine just shakes him off and tosses him to the side, continues walking on, and then Deadpool catches up, and I'm like, if that's the movie, like if that's the movie in a nutshell, in,
I'm down.
in, 1,000% in, and just yeah, I don't. I've tried to avoid it, but I've heard some stuff, and if like even a fraction of it's true, it's gonna be a wild fucking movie. Let me tell you. Like they were very much like take the toys and they let him play with the toys.
Everything he wants to do. Give this man a budget and let him do what he wants.
Let him cook.
Let let them fight.
Yeah, it's very funny because I remember years and years ago, I made a Facebook status that was basically like. Disney wants Deadpool. They'll settle for the X-Men. No, Disney wants Deadpool. They'll settle for the X-Men. And it's just so funny because nothing says that more than it just kind of sounds like this movie's Deadpool kills the Fox universe, and I'm like, yeah, they really could care less about the Fox versions of these characters. Just do whatever you want with them. It's fine. Who cares? But
I hope that's the story. That'd be dope.
Supposedly, the trailer is gonna premiere at the Super Bowl. That's the rumor that the first trailer is gonna premiere during the Super Bowl. So my question to you is, what do you think? What do you think we're gonna see in this trailer? Do you think we're gonna see sleeveless Wolverine in the trailer? Because sleeveless Wolverine is coming. It's just about
it depends.
when.
It depends. Is it gonna be like a full story trailer or is it just a teaser?
I presume teaser, but the teaser trailers nowadays they show off a little bit more than they used to.
Because
so
if it's
we're gonna
a teaser, if it's a teaser, then What do we know? Have they revealed like what the general story is supposed to be?
Nothing.
No. Then I my theory is basically
Not
you have
officially.
you have a monologue over like slowly like walking towards the camera or something Deadpool, where he's like he's talking some diatribe about whatever's relevant to the movie, or maybe it's not relevant to the movie, and that's the entire joke. And it's like it's the super serious thing because it's the third movie, and like that's gonna be the joke. Is it's like everything comes in threes, and like this is the thing, the da 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 da, and it'll be like a da 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 da, and then you'll just see Wolverine's hands, and the claws will shoot out, and it'll make the three.
Oh, see, no, I mean that's a traditional. That's a traditional
And that's what it'll be
teaser.
making fun of. Is
Yeah.
is it'll be making fun of the
I'm sure
traditional.
that will probably be a commercial that does do that. But I think for the first test, certainly we're definitely going to see Wolverine. Like, I think we're going to see
Yeah,
Wolverine in the full costume because there's been way too many leaks for them to shy away from that. And then I think he'll probably just be a variation of it, in a similar vein to yours, but in a different direction. He's gonna do a thing where he's gonna call back to that speech, that he gives him at the end of
fixing the timeline.
where he's like, one day your old pal Deadpool is gonna come back and ask you to put back on the claws, and when that day comes, say, I'm really hoping it'll cut, and then it'll just be like a shot of Wolverine going yes, and I think that would be good. But
um,
we're way more clever than these things ever end up. Well. We tend to err on the side of being more clever than these things tend to be.
I
I
mean,
say that with an asterisk because it's Deadpool.
what would be funny is if all the teaser was you had Hugh Jackman just sitting in an office with his agent or whatever reading the script for Deadpool 3, and he's like, do I have to put the costume on? And Deadpool just walks into the office and he's like, put the suit on, Jackman, put the suit on.
I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be a joke to that degree. I mean, it kind of seems like, based on at least one thing I saw, that without giving a ton away, that remember how Matt Pat to tie back to our talks about game theory. Remember how Matt Pat had that theory that he thinks that the X-Men 97 universe is going to connect to the MCU.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think this version of Wolverine is and I've said this before. Um, I think that he is the 97 Wolverine.
I think so too.
Yeah, because
I believe I.
I've seen a certain other character, and
Well, I
he is
mean, just
wearing a costume that looks just like the 90s animated version of that character.
I. I
Like
mean,
to a
I was just gonna
T.
say.
To a T.
I was just gonna say, I mean, in the multiverse of madness, that Professor X is definitely like it has the stinger.
Yeah, if not them directly, certainly an offshoot.
I just more mean like that is supposed to like
That's
that's bringing the idea that that character can exist somewhere in the multiverse, which then gives you the idea that the 97 cartoon could already be part of that
exactly.
multiverse.
Yeah. So I certainly, if he's not the version from the 97 cartoon, he's a version of the 97 cartoon.
Yeah,
For
like
sure.
it'll be an offshoot version
For
or
sure,
something.
yeah.
And
And
that'll be their way of being like he's a slight variant. That's why
yeah.
he has the full long sleeves. It doesn't
Apparently,
just have it cut off.
one of the funnier leaks I saw, which isn't a spoiler because we all know it's coming, but there was a shot of I don't know if it was Hugh Jackman or Stunt Double, and you briefly saw a sleeveless Wolverine. So it feels to me like sleeveless Wolverine is going to be a gag. It's going to be a thing where he's not going to
Probably.
have the sleeves, and Deadpool's going to be like, "Dude, that's not right," and then he'll be
He'll
sleeveless.
probably yeah. He'll probably walk out with the sleeves on, and Deadpool will be like, "That's not right." Walk up and just rip the sleeves
I'm
off.
hoping, yeah. Also, I've seen some stuff with the mask, and it looks good. It does look good.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good. I'm excited, and I'm happy it's the only one. It's the only one coming out next year. There's
That
no
gives it
other. There's no other MCU movies coming out
the
next year.
yeah, that gives it the light that it deserves.
Exactly.
The main
Don't
stage
get me wrong.
light.
There's some spum coming. We got some spum, but
Spum?
the Sony Pictures. Oh, I can never remember what it is. Sony Pictures. All
Universal movies?
universe of Marvel movies. Universe of Marvel movies. Spum. So it's their not.
Ugh.
It's like
Why?
Venom, Madam Web. Um,
Why?
but to me,
Why?
Madam Web, I'm almost tempted by because I've heard some interesting shit about it that I'm super curious about. And Venom 3, I will be there for Venom 3. I
Oh, I
mean,
mean,
I
I
will
like,
be
I
there
like,
for Venom 3.
I, I like the Venom movies. I
And I
remember
will
watching the
absolutely
trailer.
yo ho ho Craven. Ain't paying for that shit.
Um, I remember watching the trailer for the Madam Web movie, and it just doesn't look
It
good.
looks bad. It looks so bad. But
Like it just
I've heard some interesting
doesn't do it
rumors.
for me.
I've heard some rumors that like I'm gonna wait till it comes out, and if they some of them pan out and it sounds kind of intriguing, I might push for it, but I don't think I'm gonna. Craven amuses me because it's super ultra graphically violent just for the sake of it, for no real reason. And then Venom 3, obviously, yeah, I'm always interested in Venom 3. Supposedly
Yeah,
it's gonna be um
I just don't know what you do for it when you've already done multiple times. Venom fights other symbiotes.
yeah,
Like, what
is
do
he
you,
gonna
you have to
fight
bring
Toxin?
in?
But how do you do?
Like you have to bring in something for him to
The
fight, which is
rumor
not a
goeth
not a
the
symbiote.
rumor goeth that it's a Venom versus Spider-Man movie. The rumor goeth. That's what the
I
rumor
mean,
is.
I would be down for that if true.
Um, but it's like at one point I'd heard that Andrew Garfield Spider-Man was supposed to he was gonna be in Madam Web, but then they've now cut him because they've decided that they're gonna go with Tom Holland. But it's so weird because like you hear all these rumors about Spider-Man 4, and it's like but every time you see an interview with Tom Holland, he's like doesn't seem remotely interested in coming back. So it's like everything seems to hinge on him, but there's no indication that he's signed on for anything, that he's coming back for anything. Everything
I
is just like
mean,
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man is the head, Spider-Man is the head, but without Tom Holland attached to the rest of the body, you know what I mean? Like it's not gonna work.
yeah, I mean, see, in my opinion, if Sony wants to set up their own, for lack of a better term, Spider Verse, if you will, um, they just have your own Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Don't use Tom Holland. Don't. I mean, you could certainly use Andrew Garfield if he wants to come back and do it, but
yeah,
like, have a fresh person come in and have that be your version.
yeah. Well, the
And then the
theory,
and then the MCU can have the Tom Holland
yeah.
version, and you can have your own version
And then
that
Tom
you can
Holland
just,
doesn't have to do 1,000 different movies.
yeah, like that's what frustrates me about like this kind of stuff is like you guys have literally set up a multiverse.
Yeah,
You can have at this point you can have five different Spider-Man movies come out and have each of them be a different person and
right.
just say that they all exist in this
The
multiverse.
the
They're all singular stories.
the implication is that well supposedly one of the many implications is of Madam Web is a fucking weird movie, but one of the characters in it, um Adam Scott, I don't know if you know him by name,
No.
he's supposedly playing Uncle Ben, and he's gonna be and he's gonna be the one that's gonna be like the first time he says with great power comes great responsibility, and the whole bit I think I've told you this before, it's about protecting baby Peter Parker, and at one point that's
Yeah,
what
that is not what the trailer makes it look like
that's
it's
what
about.
at one point that's what Venom 3 was going to be about, was he was going to go looking for the Peter Parker in his universe, and it was going to turn out that the Peter Parker in his universe was a baby still, and he was going to feel like weirdly fiercely wanted to protect that baby, and it was going to be like him versus Toxin while he's preventing him from killing Peter Parker as a baby. And then that the whole notion of that was going to be that
Okay.
that baby was going to be like grow up to be the Sony's version of Spider-Man. But it's just like just cast, or conversely the other direction, just be like there's no Spider-Man in your universe.
I mean, I think that they should have just made it so Andrew Garfield is, and so that he
I
goes
mean,
to go and find
yes,
his version, and he finds out that his version of Spider-Man has been killing
but I
people,
also don't mind. I don't mind the notion of yeah.
and that gives the reason for why they're fighting.
Then if you want, then for me it's like well, if you're gonna do a multiverse, you can just be it where it's like in the Sony universe there is no Spider-Man, and then that way you can just drop Tom Holland's Spider-Man into the Sony universe, and you can be like that way you can skip over all the Spider-Man Venom stuff, and that's the reason why they're fighting is he's an intruder and you can skip all the personal history stuff. At least that would give
Yeah,
them.
I don't
But
know.
it's
I just think they need to introduce their own version of
I mean, they're
Spider-Man.
probably gonna eventually do a version of Venom in the MCU. If I had to, so hard to know because it's like these guys have now been around for. This is where I'm like I said last week that the MCU needs to like etch a sketch because it's kind of like yeah, a lot of these guys have been around for so long. It's like yeah, you want to see the more stuff with Spider-Man, but Tom Holland isn't gonna want to play Spider-Man for the rest of his life. So you eventually are gonna either have to recast or find an excuse for why he's a different person now.
I mean, or you just don't.
I mean, or you just don't. Anyway, moving on, moving right along. I have it in here in my list of news articles, but I didn't end up watching it, so I don't have anything to say about it really. But I don't suppose you watched the new trailer for the Princess Peach game?
No, I didn't even know they were making a Princess Peach game.
Yeah, I saw the first trailer for it. It looks kind of neat. It looks like it's a fairly basic.
It's not just like their last Peach game where they were like you play as a woman with emotions and that gives her superpowers.
No, now it's like she's got different. I only watched the one trailer and it's very brief, and I don't really remember it. But it was something. It was like a platformer. It looked like, and basically Mario. She gets her own costumes, and they all have their own powers. It's like an
All
adventure
right,
game. It looks cute and
cool.
fun, and it's for the Switch. And if I had a Switch, and it were free, I'd play it. I'm not gonna pay money for it, but it looks cute. I meant to watch the trailer for it. My next thing is Advent Children. Advent Children Complete, which is the director's cut of Advent Children, is coming back to theaters next month.
Oh,
And I don't know if
neat.
it's coming to theaters in Canada or not, where we live. Would you watch it again in theaters if it were at a convenient time
Yeah,
and it
probably. I
were
like that.
cheap?
I like that
I
movie.
know it's one of those ones I would love to see it on the big screen. I feel like the big screen would do it a service.
Um, yeah,
It's
I
been a
mean, yeah.
while since I've seen it.
If it's a reasonable price, like I don't want to pay like $50 to go watch it,
No, but if
but
it's like $5,
with the magic of Cine Club, I feel like we can make it a very achievable goal.
yes,
Hashtag this isn't a sponsor, but hashtag it totally would
it
be.
could be. It could be with the correct email. We can talk about the email address at the end of the show. Don't you worry about it. But yeah, I would. I put it in here because I was like, I'm curious as to if there's been a few times. My problem with these Fathom events is they're always on like a Wednesday or a Thursday at like 7 o'clock, and it's like, oh, I
At
don't
the
know,
worst time.
it's the worst time. But I would watch that on the big screen. Oh
I'd
yeah,
watch I'd watch most movies on the big screen just for the novelty of them being on the big screen,
yeah.
because I like watching movies on the big screen.
It
It
changes it for you. Like the first time I saw one of my favorite movies of all
forces you to
time.
focus a lot
Oh
more.
yeah. I mean, I saw the first time I saw. I think it was the first time you saw Battle Royale was on the big screen, and
Yeah,
that really
yeah.
changed it for you. The first time I saw The Big Lebowski, my friend kept saying you need to watch The Big Lebowski, and they were showing it at one of those like digital movie festivals, which I love, and I have missed for quite a number of years, but I always
I
say I want to go
mean,
back. It was like
I'm
five
never gonna
bucks.
forget. I'm never gonna forget when uh, us and our two mutual friends went and watched Back to the Future, the
On
trilogy,
the day it was
uh, on
before.
on on the big screen, and
Yeah.
it was our one friend's first time
Yeah,
watching
and it
Back
was
to the
on
Future.
the day that Marty McFly went to the future.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
And I just remember afterwards him going like, "Yeah, that was my first time watching that," and us going like,
that's why we went to it.
Was
Yeah,
that
it was
why? I thought it was just
specifically
because we like Back to the
no, it
Future.
was specifically because they hadn't seen any of them, and we're like, what? You haven't? And then that kind of sort of started a quest of being like making that person watch movies they hadn't seen. And he was
Which
like he was not a
what's
movie
funny
person. They were not a movie
funny
person.
eventually turned into this,
Yeah.
making the internet experience things they might not have seen.
I mean, it always evolves to
There's
that. I
there's
love,
a
I,
through line.
on as a quick aside, I got a comment on one of our shorts where a person was like, I never heard of this movie, and that's kind of on a THX 1138. I was like, oh, that's a nice feeling to like introduce like people to stuff that they
Which
weren't.
movie was that for?
That was the last week's. The THX was the George Lucas's
Oh,
first movie.
interesting.
Did you watch moving right along? Did you watch the trailer for the Netflix Airbender live action show?
I watched a little bit of it, and it just made me angry's not the right word, but I don't know why it has to
It's
exist.
funny because you're like the one person who hates it. Like everyone else is so stoked on it, and I went. This is giving me real Shyamalan vibes.
I don't get it.
It's like
I don't get it. It
it's
frustrates
like
me
it's
because
great. They're saying the names right this time. All right, it
why
still isn't.
why
It's taking a
why
thing
do
from animation and moving it to another format for no
yeah,
reason.
I don't like it's not the more that you make it like the cartoon, the more I'm just like, well, why wouldn't I just go watch the cartoon? It's already a masterpiece.
Yeah, and then if it's not enough like the
If it's
cartoon,
not enough like the cartoon, then it's like this isn't like the cartoon. I'm just gonna go watch the thing I like. So why are we doing this song and dance?
I don't
I
get
don't
it.
get it.
I don't mind it when you're taking. I mean I don't always love taking animation and turning it into live action, but I hate it significantly less when it's in a movie. Like when it's in a movie, it's like at least okay. You're taking it to a different medium, right? You're taking it from film to television, or from television to film, and you have to change things. Things have to be different. But this is a show, so it's just like, so what is it gonna be? A 20-minute recreation of the pilot? And then, you know what I mean? And then each
And then
episode's the
each of
same?
the episodes,
Or is it
or
gonna
like,
be
or is
different?
it gonna, yeah, or is it gonna be like one of those movies where it's like it answers or it does it like it answers questions that nobody asks, or it does scenes differently where
Or
nobody wants them to. Like, it's not gonna be that animated show, and that animated show, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it's already a
yeah.
masterpiece.
My thing
Like,
is like,
it's this is there's no way for me it's the equivalent of like when you had Will Smith have to do the impossible task of following up Robin Williams' performance of the genie
yeah.
with his own genie. Sure, maybe it'll be good. It might even be enjoyable, but it's never going to be Robin Williams version of the genie. Like, you're
Yeah.
not going to reach that same level of what made it
And the thing is,
special.
it's a Netflix show. So a Netflix show, knowing my instincts on Netflix shows, is it's gonna take probably the long version of the first season and condense it down to like 6 episodes and just skip a bunch of shit. Right?
Yeah,
That's
probably.
probably what it's gonna be. And it's gonna be like, oh, we're just gonna skip to the big cool moments so we can do the special effects shots that look cool. And it's like, yeah, the bending looks cool. Oh, and they got fire bending right. Look at that. It's like, I
Did they
guess.
did they get earthbending right, or does it still take 6 or 7 guys to do a funny dance and move one solid rock like it did in the M. Night
I
Shyamalan
have no
movie?
idea. I couldn't. I only watched the one trailer because I don't
Yeah,
have
no,
Netflix, and I'm not going to seek this out. So
I couldn't.
maybe if I had Netflix, I'd give it a shot. But I just
I
don't
watched
have
it for like
Netflix.
because on TikTok someone had it where like basically they had their live action trailer on the top and they had the actual animation on the bottom, and it was like a basically recreate like
Yeah,
the trailer but the say like, and I watched like a few seconds of it before I just, yeah, I was like, why?
yeah,
Like, why? I'm far more excited for the ones where it's like they've got the cartoon versions and it's them older, and like you
yeah.
get the continuation of
That's
their
coming.
story.
That's coming.
Like, I'm far more excited for that than I am for this, because this exasperates me
Yeah.
and just makes me just
It's like the Disney things. Yes, you're right. It's like the Disney things where it's like,
uh,
oh, we're just doing the same thing again, but worse. It's like, oh,
like,
you're
yeah,
here. Like for me, when I hear lines I've already heard, unless it's like one of those YouTube videos where the intent is to do it differently. Like there's a guy I really like. I follow him on TikTok, where he does speeches from other things, and he's got a British accent, and he does it in like a deep British accent, and he adds something to it, and he does it differently. And it's like, unless it's one of those, if I hear lines that are basically the same but different, it makes me cringe. I was like, oh,
yeah,
it doesn't sound like
it
like
doesn't sound right.
the best example of it is that, yeah, is the Lion King. Like that's just like that movie is all that. Where it's like just
Yeah.
it's just saying the original lines again, but it doesn't sound right. And I don't know. Maybe that's just an us thing. It could just be an us thing.
Maybe. All I know is that I just
I don't get it.
my animation teacher back when I was in college once said, um, the point of animation is to do stuff that you can't do in live action.
Yeah.
If you can do it in live action, because animation, traditional
It's
animation,
very
was
expensive.
very
Yeah.
expensive. So if you could do a thing in live
That you
action,
could do
then
yeah.
then why would you waste the money to animate it?
Yeah, exactly.
So like for this, I guess that's what's supposed to make it special, is that they can now do stuff that they couldn't do
Yeah.
in live
Pretty
action.
much, yeah.
But it just doesn't do it
See,
for
for me, I
me.
take it even more basically than that. And I feel this way about all remakes across the board, all of them, where I'm like, I go to the artistry of it, where it's like, why retell a story people have heard unless you're going to tell it a different way? Like, I like
Yeah,
adaptations, I do, and I like adaptations when they're different. And yes, I do understand there is a certain I do enjoy the occasional thing I recognize, right? That Deadpool, we just talked about how Deadpool, I'm excited for that because it's thing I recognize. But like they're at least taking thing I recognize and doing something quasi creative with it. You know what I mean? Like just
yeah,
doing the thing I've already seen. I've already seen it. What's the point?
yeah. I don't get it, man.
Speaking of no, what's the point? In that vein, apparently they're making a new Jurassic Park movie. Apparently, they're making another one, even though the last one was supposedly supposed to be
Is it
the
a continuation of the story, or is it like a fresh slate?
all it says is it's just a new Jurassic World movie is in the works. I think I had
Oh, it
read
is Jurassic World. Okay.
I had read that the cast was coming back, or at least some of the original cast, like the original cast was coming back. But I don't know. I don't know. This is coming
If I
soon.
was
Dot net.
them,
Their articles are kind of vague.
I would do like 10, 15 years later, a completely different cast and like show the fallout of this world that now
Yes,
has dinosaurs.
but
But
also,
that's just kind of a continuation of the last one,
yeah,
though.
I don't. I
So
mean, I don't want. Well, you saw the last one. Yeah, you did. Yeah, right. Where it
yeah,
was just mosquitoes or locusts. There was no dinosaurs in
yeah,
it.
yeah.
It was
It was the
awful.
locusts that were the problems.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, yeah,
awful.
yeah.
It was so bad, and it was like they got the original cast back for nothing, and it was like, oh man, if they really all the promos really wanted you to be like, this is the Avengers for Jurassic Park, and it just and yeah, when Dr. Grant and Ellie
Ellie.
Sattler, yeah, they are there. It's great and it's fun, and I was like, I wish the movie was all this, but every time it cuts back to Chris Pratt, I wanted to die. Um,
I mean, I wanted more. Like, I like the
I'm
scene
like,
where
leave well enough
where
alone.
Chris Pratt and Dr. Statler and them all come
That
together,
is
and
fun,
it's
I will
like
admit.
all of them together.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that it spends so much of the movie where it's like it's basically telling two
Yeah,
movies:
it's
the
two
movie of
movies.
Chris Pratt's character and the movie of the Dr. Statler and their side of things, and it doesn't really, for me, become not interesting per se, but it cohesive
Yeah,
until they come together. And to
yeah.
me, like if you wanted to have the separate things, maybe what you should have done is built up to this and had it be like where the one movie was about the Chris Pratt stuff, the
Mhm.
next movie was about the Dr. Statler stuff, and then the final one is the one that brings them together and
Agreed.
have the
Yeah.
entire movie be them together.
Quite
But,
honestly, what I
you know,
want, quite honestly, what I want, out of this Jurassic Park movie, I want a reboot. I want him to start from scratch and do a new adaptation of Jurassic Park.
eh,
And oh god, we've lost Jordan. We're losing Jordan. Um, what I want from
sorry.
from this Jurassic Park movie is I would like for them to do a reboot, cold reboot, and do what if instead of like what the original. I love the original. Don't get me wrong, I do, I truly do. But that one was what if you tried to make Jurassic Park in the '90s, right? Which in and of itself was an adaptation of what if we tried to make Jurassic Park in the '80s. So I want to see what if we tried to make Jurassic Park today. So like tell Jurassic Park, Alan Grant, all the characters, stories the same, but like with today's technology. I think that could be really and today's ideology and today's attitude towards genetic manipulation because it's a lot
Ethics and all
softer
that.
and ethics. Like yeah, our idea of bringing these things back, I'm pretty sure people would be okay with it today. I'm pretty confident people would be
Um,
okay with it.
I don't know. I
Corporately,
think it
I
would
mean,
depend.
I don't mean on a like a progressive politic. I mean like
Oh,
corporations would be
or
perfectly
yeah.
willing to do it.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure there's already talks of how to do it.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And then yeah, then you could strike that with today's liberalism and progressiveness of like environmentalism, and that can be the argument against them of the ethicality of it. And you can bring in a person and you can make fun of how they're woke or whatever, and then you can take a
I
crack at
certainly,
wokeness.
I certainly think that
Like
they need to
Abraham
do a
Malcolm.
fresh etch a sketch with the Jurassic Park,
Yeah,
where you need to have a next generation. And I mean, I would lean into maybe if you're gonna go the genetic, like, ethics and all that. I would maybe then lean into having other like prehistoric animal, like they have mammoths there, they have dodo birds, they
yeah,
have
something.
like every type of, and not just dinosaurs. And then like the point of it could be, of this generation could be like, once it goes off the rails, as it always does, it's this like this chaotic mess of like, you have all these different ages, Jurassic, Cretaceous, all of them all clashing together, and it becomes this like survival of the fittest of, is human like, are humans actually strong enough to survive against all the creatures
I
of the past.
I certainly would, yeah, would um for me, I want the story to start scratch. I don't want it to be like, oh, it's a new fresh set of characters in the same universe and it's 20. No, I want it to be like,
No, no,
we're
fresh
we
heart.
haven't seen a Jurassic Park before. Like, and
Yeah,
I love to see all sorts of. I
etch a
want,
sketch.
yeah, and what I'd really like is stop being lazy with the CGI and like really get in there and like innovate with how we present these creatures and
I mean,
go back to the drawing board with it. I think would be
I'm
incredible.
just saying, the original had practical effects and it looks
Well, where the
fantastic.
technology is with animatronics and
Let's
CGI, we can
Yeah,
meld the two in a way that is innovative. I think.
exactly. Like, let's go back to the practical effects and merge it with the technology we
Yeah.
have and just make it phenomenal. Make some
Don't do the thing where
truly
you.
terrifying, like,
Yeah.
animatronic dinosaurs that look like they'll just come to life and eat a
Like
person.
I've seen some really solid, like good
Arr.
puppetry work where I went, oh man, I thought that was a CGI effect, and it was a real puppet. Where I was like, and I think that's what we can do. I don't be like Jurassic World where you have an animatronic and then you CGI sloppily over top of it. Like I'm talking like to enhance, not to replace. But yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
think. That's what I think that franchise needs. Invincible, Jordan. I wanted to talk very briefly about because I thought it was funny. I made a TikTok about it. Um, how Invincible released 4 episodes of season 2, 5 episodes, and then went on a hiatus. And then
Yeah.
they announced. Did you see when it's coming back? Have you heard? Have you seen?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's not coming back, Jordan, until March 14th for
Wow.
four
That's bold.
episodes. For
That's bold.
4 episodes, Jordan.
So do you think that's because it was impacted by the writer's
No, it
strike?
absolutely was not impacted by the writer's strike whatsoever. This show would have been written years ago at this point. Like here's the thing. Here's the thing as a reminder and an update for the folks at home. I've said this a lot. After season 1, they went on a 2-year hiatus. They were on hiatus for 2 years. Came back, released 4 episodes, and then went on another hiatus. A
Do you think it's a
4 month
do
hiatus.
you think it's a budget thing?
No,
Like
I
they
know.
can't.
I guarantee. Well, my theory is, it's to keep people subscribe to Amazon Prime. Uh,
Right, but that's what I'm saying is, do you think that comes from above, where they're not receiving the budget to make this because Amazon is trying to do that?
no, I think it's purely a way to bait subscribers. I don't think it has to do with it. I don't think it has to do with the show. I don't think it's the
Right,
show.
but the creators of the show don't care about that. They're just
Oh yeah,
making
they
a
do.
show.
They care. They
And
absolutely
the
care.
no, 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 no. It would be the equivalent of back in the day of like the studio. The studio cares.
Yeah,
The people that are making, writing, directing the show, they don't
no,
care about
they
that.
care in the sense that they want to get it to you because they're the ones who are getting it on social media, right? So
Right.
no,
So
they have.
they want to do it as fast as
Yeah, exactly.
possible.
So it's the in your analogy, it's the studio that's delaying it. So the show
Yeah.
itself has nothing to do with it. To keep people subscribed to Amazon Prime, because because they could easily put the show, because there's a bunch of people like, oh, it's because the animation's not finished. It's not that, because this show is done. It's done and it's ready to go. It's because they know, and it's like that's why they stopped. They discovered that with Netflix, that's why they stopped just dumping all of these episodes out in one weekend. Was because they discovered people would watch it all in one weekend and then delete their Amazon Prime in this case. Now it's like, well, people will keep subscribed because it's more effort, because they want to finish out this show. It's more effort or it's less effort to just wait and then unsubscribe. So they're getting an additional 3-4 months of people subscribed.
That
That's
plus there's
that's
the
the
fact that
motivation.
if you release it all at one time, people get one big dopamine hit and then forget about your show. Whereas if you release it over time, you get a series of concentrated dopamine
Yep.
hits, which make you remember the show more, grow more fondness for it, and
Yes.
watch
It's
more.
called appointment television, and that's what made cable television so successful and last for so long, because people would tune in, and they realized that when they tried to, yeah, put them all out at once, and then just what would happen is people would watch it all in one weekend, or get one of those 30-day trial cards, watch it all in one weekend, and then unsubscribe, and then do the same thing, and they would just wait for
Mm.
it all to be out. Um, and so yeah, they realized that they want that scheduled television. But then once they gave people the option to not do that, they were like, well, I'm not gonna show up week to week anymore. Why would I do that? It's why, like, disproportionately shows do better on streaming now than they do on cable. It's because people just wait for it all to come out and watch it all in one go. Um, oh yes, I pulled this up. Um, sorry. Oh, this article is long winded. Where the heck? Sorry, they announced when Miss the Marvels is coming to Disney Plus, and I was gonna be like, you should watch it maybe.
I mean, I probably was gonna watch it.
February 7th is coming to Disney Plus, so when it does, be prepared to watch it because I'd like to talk about it. Just giving a heads
That's
up.
fair. I was probably gonna watch that one anyway.
Yeah, I know, Sam. It's on my list. Um. Oh yeah, here's
When
a funny bit of news.
when I was trying to find ones that I hadn't seen from 2023 for that episode, that was one that I wanted to watch because I hadn't seen
Yeah,
that one, and
that
it wasn't available at the time.
that and for me, Aquaman, I'm gonna seek out. I'm gonna watch. Um, that I'm thinking just as an alert for the future, maybe a future episode of what we missed last year. That we might do that as an episode. So there's this funny. So, um, it just shows like how the internet reactionary culture hasn't caught up to a certain creators' sensibilities. That'll make sense in a second. The Ruby Sunday, the girl who plays Ruby Sunday, it's been announced she's leaving at the end of the next series of Doctor Who, and they're
Yeah, I
replacing her
heard
with
that.
another. Yeah, and everyone was like, this drama of why did she get fired? What did she do on set? Who did she upset? And
I mean, the thing is that about that is that there have been characters in Doctor Who that don't last that long. Like it's
that's what
not
I was just gonna
new.
say. I was just gonna say, everyone on the internet's like freaking out about it, and my instinct as a person who remembers back in the day, yeah, he didn't have companions stick around. So that tells me that the theory is that she's somebody big. Remember how I had the theory that she's related to someone big. I think she is related to someone big, and I think her story will conclude at the end of the series and she won't come back, or she'll come back in a guest starring capacity, and it'll be like a Martha Jones or a Rose Tyler where she shows up again for it's Russell T Davies. He boots out and he had his built-in homebound TARDIS team, right? And
Yeah,
I think that that's probably coming back.
probably. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he was just she'll just. I mean, the thing is that people forget that there have been companions where it's like they left at the end of a series or whatever, and then like were gone for like half a series, and then came back halfway through the next series. So it's
Exactly.
like, for all we know, she'll be gone for 5 episodes and then come back.
Exactly.
It's so hard to predict with Doctor Who. You take everything at face value. Don't take everything at face value, rather.
Pretty much. And then lastly, they have finished. Apparently, I didn't even know it had started, but apparently they finished shooting Mortal Kombat 2. And I'd read a while
Oh,
back.
the movie?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
interesting. Did I
excited. I'm
see that one?
excited. Yeah, we watched it one day when the power went out, and
Right,
we
right,
had
right, right.
partaken in substances.
Mo- Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat. We were watching it in my room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I remember that now.
yeah. I like that movie. I was. It's funny because if Jake were watching, he would say how much he hated that movie. Um, and
I
when I
seem to
guest starred
remember
on it,
enjoying that one.
I did too. I love that movie. I thought that movie was great. But yeah, he when I was on his podcast, the Arate podcast, um, yeah, we talked about how he hated that movie, and I liked it. And there was a lot of people who hated it because they don't do a Mortal Kombat, but like I like, and this is gonna sound really bad, but I like it when movies are cartoonishly violent just for the sake of it and for no rhyme or reason. So like one of my favorite movies is The Immortals. It's one of the bloodiest movies I've ever seen, and it's just senseless, and the story just serves to be bloody. And as a representation of the game, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty much got it. And I thought the fighting was good. I thought it was a little strange that the main guy wasn't just Johnny Cage. Like it was weird that they created a new character who basically had the same story as Johnny Cage. It's like, why isn't he just Johnny Cage? But Johnny Cage is in the next one, and he's played by Carl Urban, which I thought was interesting.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool. That'll
yeah,
be fun.
yeah. Sounds fun. And maybe they'll actually do a Mortal Kombat in this one.
Mortal
Um,
Kombat. Do, 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 do,
but
do.
yeah. That's it. That's it for the news.
I had one thing that I heard about shortly before the stream. For those, I haven't corroborated this, so this is just something that I saw on TikTok that I thought was interesting, and this was an excuse to talk about it. Oh God, this thing doesn't want to stay up today. Um, so for those who live in Canada, apparently, over the past like couple months or something, there's been big sections of the Toys R Us store where the shelves have been like going empty, and they've been putting up signs that something's coming soon and stuff like that. And so you might remember a little store called HMV.
Oh yeah,
Apparently, it's going to now exist in Toys R Us.
really
Yeah.
fascinating.
That's
Interesting.
all. That's all that I read. I don't know any of the details. I don't know like if that's. I haven't corroborated
I
it, but
mean, if it's
that was
anything like
something that
Sellers
popped
in the
up.
Bay, it's
That's kind of what it's being attributed to, where
yeah,
it's like
that's not great. At least if it's anything like the Sellers in our Bay, it's not very good.
a store in a store kind
Yeah,
of thing. But
it's
I, I,
half-assed.
I I'm curious about because it was a music store, but CDs aren't really a thing anymore. So is it just going to be like?
Uh,
Is it just going to be like a vinyl section?
um, I mean,
Keeping in mind that it's in Toys R Us.
HMV was a CD. They did sell CDs and records, but they also sold uh, gimmicky merchandise and DVDs and Blu-rays and posters and T-shirts and shit like that. So I don't know. And that was a store that when it disappeared, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Um,
I missed it because of the like it had the geeky section with the geeky stuff, and I bought stuff from there a few
yeah,
times. One of our things on the wall, the Doctor Who thing, is from there.
true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Um,
I used to go in there for DVDs.
that too.
They have really good sales on
They
DVDs.
had great last minute gifts when I needed to buy stuff for
Yeah,
you.
or
I
or
really,
CDs. I bought a couple CDs from them as well back in the day.
I missed when it got, but that I thought was interesting, and I wanted
Yeah.
to mention that.
So moving right along. Moving right along. Um,
Good da 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 da
um,
da 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 da.
we're moving right into the sponsorship section of the show. This is the section of the show where if you want to sponsor us, you're more than welcome to. We can talk about how you can do that at the end of the show. Don't you worry. But in the meantime, this podcast is brought to you by the Arete Podcast Network and aretemedia.org. That's ARETE media.org. That is our network. You can go check them out. There's all sorts of podcasts. There's a Broadway podcast. There's a wrestling podcast. There's another pop culture podcast, Toon Talk 2.0. There's one podcast that talks about Goosebumps. There's all sorts of stuff. And if you're looking to start your own podcast, they can absolutely help you out with that. You can contact them there. Tell them we sent you, and they can get you started with that. We can get you started with that. We can get you talking about stuff on the internet. It's super fun. That's aretemedia.org. And with that, there is no prologue today, Jordan. We're just gonna jump right on into who is your director, and let's talk about their filmography.
So my director is Robert Zemeckis.
Bobby
He's
Zemeckis.
got a few things under his belt. You might have heard of him.
So before we
Um,
get into the individual movies themselves, let's talk real quick about, does Robert Zemeckis have a particular style? Would you say, like, when you watch his movies, are you like, that's a
I
Bobby Zemeckis film?
I I'm bad at noticing those kind of things unless they're really on the nose.
Like distinct.
Um, but not really. I don't see one.
Like, would you say that the movies you're about to tell us about, would you say that they're different from one another? Like, decidedly different, distinctively different. Like, had you not known that they were all directed by this guy, would you know? Because funny enough, when you said to me yesterday that he had directed the Pinocchio movie, which I had to watch a couple weeks ago, um, I had no idea that was a Robert Zemeckis film. No clue.
I would say two of them have a style that I would kind of say are similar.
Okay.
Two of the ones that I saw. Um, I mean, three of them definitely do because they are sequels to each other.
Right.
So, they definitely have a similar style, but I don't think that those ones are the same as the other two. So it depends on the movie.
Okay.
Like
So let's.
I feel like his style changes depending on what the content of the movie is and what it's about.
Okay.
If I had that'll make sense
Okay. So
when
let's
I
get into the nuts and
articulate.
bolts of this. What's your first movie?
First movie is actually three movies because I lumped them together.
Okay.
It's also probably the one that most people know that he did, which is
Okay.
Back to the
So
Future.
we don't need to describe the
Um,
plot of Back to the Future.
it is not his first rodeo, as it were.
Yeah.
So he actually started his first two. I'm going off of IMDb, so take this with a grain of salt. But his first two directorial pieces uh, are actually shorts.
Oh
So
yeah.
he started off doing short movies,
Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
then he did three movies before he finally did it right and got to Back to the Future.
What's his first feature?
His first feature is a movie called "I Want to Hold Your Hand." It's from 1978.
Huh.
I didn't watch that one, so I can't really
Was
tell
there
you about
anything
that one.
notable in his first before he gets to Back to the Future?
He had Used Cars in 1980
Yeah.
and then Romancing the Stone in
Oh yeah. Okay.
1984.
That's a yeah. You wouldn't have heard of Romancing of the Stone, but that's a big one. That's a
I
really big
I
one.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
But
Okay. So
just
Back to the
just
Future.
looking at the star ratings though, it's funny because for those first three,
Yeah.
it's like 6.8, 6.7, 6.9. Back to the Future 8.5.
But Romancing the Stone is it's a pulpy adventure. It's based on those pulp adventure novels. I think it's an adaptation of one, and it's like a
Uh
real like jaunt through the jungle kind of swashbuckling kind of movie. Old wives
so
like it.
So, Back to the Future. We've all seen Most of us have seen Back to the Future. I don't need
Yeah.
to go over plot by plot
No,
detail,
let's for the sake of
but
brevity, let's try
uh,
not to.
um, I do want to say that that first one, I don't, I don't. To say a movie is a perfect movie, I don't think such a thing
Some people
exists.
might say
There,
that this one is. That's
yeah, I think it gets about as close to perfection as you can,
I won't do a perfect movie because I don't believe
but
there's
I,
such a
I
thing.
don't think a perfect movie
Themes of
exists.
incest is going to be
Um,
one of the criticisms I would lobby towards it.
I it's certainly a choice. But it checks a lot of the boxes for
Oh
me.
yeah.
It's fun. It's got a great cast.
Hmm.
Um, it's. I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said by people that are smarter and more articulate than me? Um,
It's like the
it
seminal 1980s movie. Like
yeah
if someone were
yeah
to be like, describe the 1980s to me, I'd be like, come watch a movie with me, sir,
yeah.
or madam, or
Um,
otherwise. Come watch this movie with me. That's the
um,
1980s.
And
fashion, music,
so
everything, like just
oh, I
attitude.
mean, and it's so then we move into okay, so that one's great. We move into the second one, which some argue isn't. Some people don't like it,
Yeah,
um,
and I think they're
or
fair criticisms.
certainly
I do think they're
I
fair.
I do. I think that their interpretation of 2015 is
Yeah,
hilarious.
in retrospect,
Um,
yes, yes, it is.
as it like their style, a lot of the style of the clothing that you see are definitely an 80s person,
For
like an
sure.
80s idea of what that time would
I
be.
think it's
Um,
for me anyway. I like the second one more because I mean it goes to the future. It was called Back to the Future, and it was like, yeah, going we went to the past, that's also why I don't like, and a lot of people don't. I mean, I didn't mind it as a kid, and growing up, it was always kind of like, yeah, seeing it something the same but from a different perspective. Sort of eventually I grew to interest me, but like, yeah, it is just a rehash of the first one. So like
the second half of it definitely
at
is.
face I get it, I really do. But yeah, I'm always more interested when they're going to the future rather than the past.
Um,
I have to take some
The
water
second
here.
one, okay, for me in terms of order, it goes by their release order. I like the first one more. I like the second one, the second best, and I the third one, I don't mind it, but it's not my favorite.
It's just, yeah,
But
it's
the
not my
second
favorite.
one, the thing that I like about the second one that makes it better for me than the third, which maybe that's a controversial opinion, is the fact that I mean, you've got it introduces the idea of them going to the future, so you get to see that. That's
Yeah,
different. That's new. That's new. That's
exactly.
unique. And then not only do they have that, but then you come back to the present and you have this twisted alternate, like alternative version of Hill Valley,
Hmm.
with Donald Trump running. I mean, Biff Tannen, uh,
Not Donald Trump.
running. Definitely. Although apparently he was inspired by Donald Trump.
Yeah,
Um,
that well,
um,
it's the answer has changed a number of times over the years.
he definitely was. Anyways, you have that version of Hill Valley, which is fun, and then and this is the reason why I don't mind when he goes back to the past again. I don't love it, but I don't mind it. Is because in terms of that movie, that it just you get three very distinct styles,
Yeah,
um, and it lends to very different visual like medium, and it makes it more interesting.
exactly. Yeah,
Rather like the first one is just all or mostly in the past.
yeah,
The second one, you get three different styles, and then the third one, you get cowboy, which it makes it different, and it makes it not just feeling like we're rehashing again. So I appreciate
yeah.
that
But
about
I
the
just
third one,
don't like the
but
cowboy aesthetic.
I'm not a big cowboy guy, so it
For
doesn't
me, the third one could
really.
take place in any other time, and it probably would do it for me
I
more.
I personally, because one of the things that I this time watching around that I really liked the idea of about the third one was when you have the ice machine where it's like the dog or like you see the callback to the first movie where you have the doc's automatic food making system,
Yeah,
and all of that, like all the stuff that helps him with his day-to-day stuff, but now it's in the old west.
right.
I would have found it far more interesting if it, like instead of it being the old west, he had ended up in like medieval times.
Hmm.
And so like you have like all these old medieval timey like fancy ass inventions and stuff. I just personally
I
I think
mean,
that would have been more
the
interesting.
reason why he winds up in the old west is because, if I
The
recall,
train. It's the train.
well, it's because he says, well, it's supposed to be ironic. It's supposed to be poetic irony because it's like he says earlier, if I recall, correct
Oh,
me if I'm wrong.
that he loves the old
Yeah, that
west.
he's
Yeah.
always wanted to go back to the old west. That's where he wanted to go back
Yeah.
to, and that's why he winds up in the old west. To me, I think maybe, um, if they had focused, if there was more effort put in on the front half, maybe of him trying to get back to the, because he just kind of is immediately
He
in the
gets
old
there. Yeah,
west.
he gets there a little too quick. Yeah.
And I think it would be kind of interesting is you mentioned and I just kind of literally in this moment had this thought. This was great about live television. Um, if maybe like, um, the present that Marty leaves from, which is the past for him, 1955, if that was now advanced because Doc Brown is in the
Because the
past
doc.
and he's now introducing
Yeah.
all this tech like 20 years earlier,
That
so
that
they're
didn't
way more
exist.
advanced. Yeah,
Yeah.
and now it's like almost a dystopia, almost a future dystopia, and it's a little harder for him to go back, and then that way it's at least different. So it's not all, but again, that's just
Well,
me tailoring it for my own personal preferences, though. That's not me saying that
especially
it's a bad
because
movie because I don't think it's
oh
a
no,
bad
it's
movie.
not. I like the third one.
I
It's
just
fine.
don't
It's
like
fun.
cowboy shit.
It's enjoyable. But you're right. Like what they could have done. And hindsight is 2020. It's
Yeah,
easy to look back on a thing and nitpick. But what they could have done and
that's what
what
we're
they should
doing.
have done, what they could have done and what they should have done is because they have this idea that Doc goes back and even before Marty comes back, he has saved Clara,
Yeah,
right? She is now a woman who exists in time that didn't in the original timeline.
yeah,
So to have it be where now in the 1955 or where Marty is, there are descendants of Doc Brown that have now influenced time
yeah. Ooh, that's not a bad
because
idea.
because because Clara exists. He fell in love with her. They
Yeah,
still like they had kids
yeah.
who
Instead
then
of
would have had kids who then would have had kids.
Yeah, so instead of and yeah, maybe when they're looking for the DeLorean, and that's who introduces. Yeah, that's kind of that's an interesting idea. I mean, I'm sure
But
it's scripting. They probably thought of that stuff. I'm sure.
one thing that I thought of watching it this time that I never really thought about before, and okay, so anyone who's listening and or watching that knows anything about riding horses, tell me how hard is it? Like
Depends on the
how
horse.
difficult, like I more mean like, so where Marty lives, do you think he rides a lot of horses? Do you think
Uh,
he himself has past experience, because he sort of shows up in the old west and just sort of immediately knows how to perfectly ride a
he's just
horse,
immediately hyper competent.
enough, yeah, he's hyper competent enough to catch a train.
Um, That's hard to say. I don't know. There's a chance he might have some horseback riding experience. The difficulty with which to ride a horse depends on A, your ability, and B, the horse. Like, if you have a really chill horse, it seems, I don't know, movies give the impression that it's a lot of it's instinct. You just kind of figure it
um
out.
because like when
I
I
didn't
because
have an easy time doing it. I can tell you that.
I I looked it up because I was curious. Just I wanted to get a general idea, and the general idea that the internet has pervaded me with or given me is that it's a muscle, like it's a skill, it's a muscle. It's like doing any sport
Yeah.
where if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult to do it.
Yeah.
Now I fully believe that Doc Brown was there long enough. He set up a business. He has picked up the
He's
skill.
figured out how to ride a horse. Yeah.
But Marty was there for a couple days. I just have my suspension of disbelief is a little
Well,
bit
isn't there that montage of him like training with shit? So maybe he
not
learned,
a ho-
maybe he
not a
practiced.
horse. I
No,
don't
but I
think
mean,
so.
it's one of those moments where maybe you're supposed to think it happened off camera, or he's just hyper confident. I don't know.
It's just a thing that I thought of. I was like, does he ride horses back in his time?
Maybe.
But so
I
then
can't remember where he
the
lives.
other scene in the movie, which I wanted to, because it made me laugh, because I never thought about how cheaply made the DeLoreans are, which is very obviously why that and the Gullwing door are why it was chosen as the car of choice
I think
for
it.
Back to the
I
Future,
think it's
is
mostly
because
the
it was probably very cheap to buy a bunch of them. Um,
I think so. There's a movie that tells you that story. It's about John DeLorean. It's weird. It's half documentary, half biopic. I'm pretty sure it was specifically the Gullwing Door because it looks sci-fi.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could believe that was the bulk of the reason,
I'm
but
impressed you knew it
I,
was a
da- I,
Gullwing Door. I just
uh,
called it that because you did. I literally didn't know that's what it was called until I just learned a
I,
new thing.
I'm pretty sure that's what it's called.
It's gonna be really.
I,
This is now gonna be a short, and it's gonna be really embarrassing when people tell us we've called it something wrong.
I'm pretty sure that's what it. I'll look it up after, but I'm pretty sure. I just that name sticks out in my because it's going. It's like when a
I'm
bird is flying.
I absolutely believe you. I could Google it right now. I'm not going to because it's either go. We can fact
Um,
check it afterwards. We're either going to be really embarrassed or very right.
but I'm
Anyway,
80%
yeah, I'm
sure
pretty sure
that I'm
that
right.
is the reason. It's the doors.
Anyway, So I find it funny where it's like it's at the end of the movie, the car's on the railroad tracks and the train comes and just plows into it,
Yeah.
and it falls apart like it's made of Lego.
Well,
Like it,
shit like that amuses me. It's like whenever I see explosions in a movie from the 1960s and 70s, it's like
it's like it's
they had
so
to do that.
perfect.
Like, so yeah, they that had to have been like one of the last days they were shooting that movie. They've been making these movies for like 8 years or whatever. Like they're not making another one, and they're like, we're destroying the fucking DeLorean. Like that there's no way, like there's no way that wasn't like a last day thing. They all stood around and like Christopher Lloyd
I
like wiped
watched it.
away a tear. Like,
But it made me laugh because I was like, it looks like it's made of Lego
oh
and it's
yeah,
full,
yeah, they have shit
and like
fucking cars.
there's like nothing left after. It's like I don't I feel like a train does a lot of damage, obviously,
Yeah.
but I feel like if like a Ford truck was on there,
Oh yeah,
like there would be like the shell of the truck would at least
it
remain.
always makes me think of that bit in American Dad where he's like, yeah, there's a reason why they said 88 miles per hour. That's the speed these cars top out at. Not a very
Very
good
cheaply
car.
made, not a very good car. Um,
What's your next selection?
so
And
okay.
and to be clear, you've seen Back to the Future before.
Oh yeah, I've seen
Yeah,
it.
yes, yes.
I've seen it. I've
This is
seen it
the
so many
order. This
times.
is the order we're doing this in.
Uh,
So next project.
so I have the actual next one, and then I have one that I'm just going to briefly touch on because I like it. Uh, so the one that I'm going to briefly touch on is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, I love
Uh,
that movie.
because I love that
I
movie.
love that movie.
It is
It's a
oh
technical masterpiece, man.
it's a technical masterpiece, and not just that,
It's
but like they Warner
harrowing.
Brothers, Disney came together to do something together. That was like the first time they ever did that,
Yeah.
as far as I know. And it's a great story. It's fun. It's a timepiece, so it's like takes place in a
Yeah, it's
certain
just a
age of
really
time,
good detective noir film. Like it's
and
really
and
good.
and
Yeah.
it's also a another it has Christopher Lloyd in
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and he is terrifying.
Proper
When
upsetting.
I killed your brother, just like this. It's oh my god.
There's no way you
Um,
didn't just peek the shit out of your mic, but that's okay.
oh, probably, but so yeah, no, I wanted to briefly touch on that because that one is just a
Yeah.
fantastic
No,
piece of
that
film.
scene at the end, man, that was I think every millennial or person our age is like, yeah, it was traumatizing as a child. Like there's a
And so
selection of time where they're like, kids movies need to be traumatizing. They
no,
need to remember this.
I wouldn't call it a kids movie. I'd call it a family movie. And to me, there's like a PG versus G, or
Yeah.
PG
Well,
13, whatever. Like
back then
there's a
there wasn't
distinct
a
difference.
there wasn't a
But
PG, I don't think at that point. But yeah, I know what you
um,
mean.
so when you ask me if Robert Zemeckis has a distinct style, and this is why I wanted to bring this one up. I find that he has a couple different ones. So in terms of this style that he has, the style is like timepiece.
Yeah.
So like Back to the Future is like a timepiece of the 80s.
Yeah.
This is a timepiece of like the 30s or
But
the
the thing is,
40s or whatever.
I agree with you about Back to the Future, but not in that it's a timepiece of the '80s, because at the time you have to remember these of their time, and the '80s stuff at the time is contemporary, right? But you're right about it being a timepiece in the sense that it is a timepiece and a remembrance of the 1950s. That's what I would say. So I think you're correct in your assessment. Just I think your time frame is incorrect.
But so that's definitely what I would say like one of his, at least from the movies that
That's
I've
interesting. I could see
watched.
why you would say that.
Um or like even like when you look at like and I didn't watch these ones, but I've seen them kind of enough that I can
Yeah.
loosely bring them up. When you look at like his Christmas Carol, for example, or even Polar Express, those are timepieces from for Christmas Carol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the time that the story takes place,
Exactly.
and for Polar Express, for the day, like for the time when it came out, it is a
See,
timepiece for that time.
I do see what you mean, but also those animated ones, I would argue. I mean, you could say that's a genre of the animated ones, but I would say it's a subgenre. He has this subgenre of weird, uncanny valley animated movies.
Yeah. He does. He was trying to progress things in that way that
Yeah. He for
it's a choice.
It's funny that you mentioned. I mean, that's sort of jumping ahead. But it's funny that you mentioned when you said earlier the idea of why do a thing in live action or in animation that you can do in live action. Those
Yeah,
movies are just that idea of like
yeah.
why did he do these movies in animation? They could be in live action. There's no reason
They
for that.
in terms of A Christmas Carol, it has been in live
Yeah,
action.
yeah. Although that one was a bit different because they do get a bit weird towards the end of it, where it's
Yeah,
like, okay,
that's
yeah.
true. But
But sorry, next one.
my next one that I've seen, um, is Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. I love Forrest Gump.
It's a classic. It it is. What can I say about it?
It's just
Um,
such a well-made movie.
it's
The
really
performances are
solid.
good. I
It
see. We can gush. See, it's really funny for those. I always go back to top 100, top 100 the movie on YouTube right now. You can YouTube it after you watch this podcast. Um, but in that one, I said I love that movie, and I laugh where I feel like I'm supposed to laugh.
yeah.
I think a lot of the special effects of
Put
implementing.
putting Tom Hanks into
Yeah.
scenes that he wasn't
Also,
in.
we're not going to recap Forrest Gump. I feel we don't need to do that. That's not
Eh,
obscure. I think
it's a
going
classic.
forward, let's just not recap the ones that are classics. Only the really obscure ones, which
I
will
mean,
we
the only thing is like if I think you haven't seen it, or if there's a specific scene that I want to talk
yeah,
about,
yeah,
and it needs a little bit of
exactly.
context or a little bit of
Because
building up.
because and this is how the sausage is made stuff. Um, I could feel both of us drooping when we were describing the plots of these movies to each other. So if we're drooping, the audience is drooping. So for the sake of brevity, um, but tag back
Forrest
in
Gump,
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah, the technology of blending Tom Hanks in with some of the, and it's really fun. That's another one where it's fun to go and um, you know the scene where he's being interviewed and he's with John Kennedy and Yoko Ono. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an actual interview from obviously, and you can go watch the original one of it to see what it's like, and then it's fun to compare them. There's a few
Oh,
moments like that where
that's
this
funny.
is actual footage, and it's funny watching it. When I first watched it years and years ago when I was a kid, it was like mind blowing. Or when we were teenagers at the place and we watched it the
Um,
first time. And it was like, yeah, it was really. Now I watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see some of the hinks and some of the lines, but
um,
I don't know why my nose is
so
so itchy.
so with Forrest Gump, it does. Okay, so he is like endlessly infatuated with Jenny, and she over many years continues to try and be like, no, Forrest,
Yeah,
like, no.
my man lives in the friend
So
zone.
so how to word this? Is he not a bad guy, but like it doesn't portray it as problematic that he can't take no for an answer.
I mean, I get what you mean, but that's a chunk of that movie takes place in like the 50s and 60s. So like you gotta kind of approach it from that mind frame of like that was seen as enthusiastic and romantic and like it's not
Yeah,
my idea,
yeah,
my 2023 idea of I
right,
think I might have
right.
said that similar thing where I'm like my idea of consent, and also this movie is also made in the 1990s and sensibilities have changed. So it's like my
True,
ideas of consent are very different than Forrest Gump, who's living in the 1960s consent. Right?
true, very
Right?
true. And I would also, Jenny is a problematic and tragic
See,
character
that's
who
where I.
has a lot of things that uh, happen over the course of her life that one should feel sorry for.
See, but
She
my.
also, she also, hold on, she also makes choices that there are consequences for the actions that we take. And I would maybe argue that I don't want to say she
But
gets what she deserves, but
but
you
okay.
know,
Here's my thing though. Okay, with Forrest Gump, and I will always try to avoid politics on this show, but um. And this comes with a massive asterisk of what I'm about to say does not come with judgment. It's merely just facts. Okay? And the fact is, this is a weirdly conservative movie where it's like Jenny, the evil, no good liberal who has liberal ideas and is a dirty, filthy, disgusting hippie and questions the status quo and goes against the grain. She's the bad one who deserves to get HIV or AIDS or mysterious illness. But Forrest Gump, who's a good American Texan boy, does literally everything he's told and listens to every word and is completely directed and doesn't have a form or ounce of free thought, is ultra successful, becomes super rich, and is well off in the end. Like, it's just like, oh,
I
blind
mean,
obedience will get you everywhere, is what this
it,
movie ultimately is saying.
when you say it like that, it certainly sounds like propaganda, doesn't it? You
It
you
certainly is
you
a
go you
very conservative
go
movie.
go join the military. You have to fight for a little bit, and then you just get to hang around and play ping
Just
pong
just do
until you
exactly what's asked of you. Don't question
until
anything.
you get rich and own a shrimp company and everything works out for you.
Yeah, you
Just
don't
join the
don't
military.
question a thing. Listen to every bit of authority that's offered to you, and don't and everything will just be handed to you your whole life. That's the
I had
lesson from
never
Forrest Gump.
I, I had never really thought about that, but you're kind of right.
I'm just saying.
Um,
I'm just saying
but
that's not me casting moral aspersions to it. It's
I
just
know. I mean,
the
I
movie
still
as it
like the
is
movie.
presented. Yeah, exactly.
I still like the movie. It's just that's a thing.
Yeah, that's where I say I fully believe in being and that there's no such thing as a perfect movie and you can be critical of the things you love. I love Forrest Gump. I love that movie. I loved it the first time I saw it, and that's one of those times where it was like I felt
Life is like a box of chocolate.
there's
You never
certain
know what you're gonna get.
there are certain movies I watched when I was like younger where it was like, oh, I liked it, and it felt like I'm an adult liking a movie that I should be liking kind of moments. That was before I had the capacity to understand things critically. And that was the first time where I was like, wow, this is like a well made and well constructed movie, and I appreciate its contribution to cinema. Let's talk about the shit you haven't seen, though.
So moving on to the first one, um, Castaway.
Yes, now
We
Castaway.
are castaways.
We don't need to
Uh,
go over the plot of Castaway either. I get it. He was cast away and then he gets rescued. I know I know that the quite a bit of it, more than you think, is about him getting back from the island.
a good chunk of it is, but I do want to talk about the like the crash itself,
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough.
um, because as a person who is absolutely terrified of flying, me, in
I'm
case the
also
audience
terrified
didn't
of flying.
realize, um, that scene was nightmare fuel.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. All,
that
all
that
plane
that
crash scenes are for me.
that scene coupled with the recent the plane that's the Boeing or whatever that the door
Yeah,
came flying off
I've been avoiding
um
some airplane stories recently for that exact reason. Cause yeah,
uh
they freak me out.
upsets me and freaks me out, because it's like in this one he's the Tom Hanks is a FedEx employee, and he is also a drill sergeant, let me tell you, because man is committed to his job. But so he's on the plane, the FedEx plane flying to wherever, it doesn't matter, and he's in the bathroom, and then the door just gets ripped off, and he's like flying about
Oh,
in the
so it's not like a
cabin.
commercial plane. Like he's on this plane by
No,
himself.
he's on a FedEx plane with like four other guys who are all like the
Oh.
pilots and stuff.
Oh, okay. So it really
Uh,
is like that book Hatchet. That's what this makes me think
Yeah,
of.
yeah. That's it's funny that you say that because as I'm watching it, I kind of thought to myself, man, this feels like a grown up version of
Well,
Hatchet.
no, I mean Hatchet came out, but yeah, I remember when I
No,
saw
no.
it on
I
the
when I
ad
say when I say grown up, I mean it's Hatchet with a grown
with a
up.
grown up. No, I know what you meant. Yeah, no, what I mean is I do remember I was giving. I don't know if it was definitely out because Hatchet is quite an old book, but I definitely
Oh,
remember seeing.
Hatchet was out when we were kids. This movie came out in 2000.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we were still kids then. Um,
No, but younger kids.
Younger kids, yeah. But no, I remember that was definitely present in my mind when that movie came out, being like, oh yeah, it's like that book Hatchet.
Um, so he's like struggling, floating about the cabin, and the pilot, the captain and pilot and stuff, and all the airplane workers are all like, um, strap into your seat, put the air breathing mask on, and like here's your life raft in case we go, because they were over the Atlantic, which is like
Oh, that's yeah,
the
that's
I don't
even more
or
of a fear
I
for
don't know.
me.
I don't know if it was the Atlantic, but it was the ocean.
Anytime we fly
Uh,
and I see our plane over like a large chunk of
over
water,
open
my
water. Yeah,
stomach
no.
just feels uncomfortable.
Oh, number one fear being crashing in a plane and it being over
I
water.
I would like to go
Uh,
cross continental, but man, am I terrified of it. I will be scared the whole
yeah,
time. I don't care how
but yeah.
safe people say flying is. I don't care.
And so terrible crash happens. He ends up in water in big waves, and it's dark, and like his survival stuff came detached from the life raft. So my man has like nothing except for the raft and like clothes off his back. Gets on the island, and there's all these FedEx packages that are all in the water. He gathers them up, and like the committed employee that he is, and like has them at his makeshift campsite, and like isn't opening them and just kind of collects them as he finds them. And I'm like, my man, that is dedication. Stranded on
So
an island and not immediately opening these packages to
so
see what he can
when
use to
it
help him
when
survive.
he gets rescued, do they get the FedEx packages back?
No, he uses them.
Oh, he does eventually use them.
He
That's
does. He was on the island.
that's.
Actually, what's funny is, so having not seen the movie, how long do you think he was on the island for?
I'm guessing. Well, okay. I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen clips from it. So having seen the clips, I'm gonna guess at least maybe a couple of years, because
He's on the island for about 4 years.
okay, yeah, because I remember there's that one clip of the guy where he was like, yeah, we thought you were dead. We had a funeral,
We've moved on. We had your funeral,
and
and
he's like,
he's
what was
like,
in the coffin?
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it was a bunch of keepsakes and like stuff that these people
So
like.
it's like when they say that, that indicates to me it was a while.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 years, something like
And
that.
then so then
Um,
um
so he at a certain point, he's been living on this island talking to Wilson, his volleyball friend, with
yeah,
you know, basically my man goes insane.
yeah, naturally.
And as one does when they're isolated for 4 years. Um, and at a certain point, part of an outhouse turns up on the island, and he uses that, plus some of the stuff that was in those FedEx packages to fashion a raft, and he sails off the island. Because earlier in the movie, he tried to do that with what remained of his life raft, but the waves were just too big and too intense, and he it doesn't work out. Let's just say he cuts himself on the reef. He cuts himself a few times over the course of the movie, and every time I'm like, man, if like if he doesn't die from infection,
Right?
then like insanity
Impressive he
and
doesn't get a
stuff will
staph
take him.
infection.
Yeah, and so he sails off into the sea, and bad waves happen. Raft is kind of wrecked, and Wilson, the volleyball, ends up floating away in the water, and he like jumps off the raft to try and go and swim after him. He's like, Wilson, Wilson, and like he's holding on to the rope of the raft so he doesn't get too far from it. And like there's this moment where it's like he's like considering letting go of it, but he's so exhausted and tired that like when he lets go of it, he starts and so he's like, I'm sorry, Wilson. And he has to let the volleyball go. And it's like there's this deep emotional trauma of like his only friend that he's had for 4 years is dead, and like going out, and it's like, oh, this is heavy. Um and
Getting emotional about
um
a ball.
about a volleyball. And so big tanker ship ends up finding him, and he gets rescued. He gets off the island. And so then, yeah, the movie then kind of becomes about, well, he's come back to society, to this world that, he's no longer a part of, and everybody has moved on and thinks that he's dead. And Like there's a scene where he's in the hotel room and he's like he keeps flipping the light on and off because obviously he hasn't had electricity, so that's
Yeah.
weird now. And his girlfriend, fiance, I think she was just a girlfriend. They weren't married. That was kind of the one of the points is that he never proposed because she had an ex-husband, and like there was this whole thing where it feels like he should have long since proposed but never did. And so he comes back and she's like married and has a kid. And is has moved on, and it's like they have this whole scene where uh they're like they end up kissing in the rain, and she's like, you're my true love. And he's like, but you have to go back, and she's like yeah. And it's really sad and emotional, and from what I remember, it doesn't really have a happy ending per se. There's a certain point where he had the one package left that he didn't open, which he was returning. Like he it was a return to send. He brought it back to their house, and like he's driving off from there, and then there's this like cute girl on the side of the road that's like, "Do you need directions?" And he's like, "Yeah." Blah blah blah, and she gives him directions, and then I think it's supposed to imply that that girl was the person that he just returned the package to,
Oh.
because they weren't in the like the person they weren't in the house. And so I think, and like they had like a rapport going, like a back and forth going. So from what I recall, I think the implication is basically supposed to be that like maybe there's some connection there that's going to form, and life continues on,
Life moves
and
on.
like things keep going, and he's at least off the island, and he didn't die, and that's good. Um, so that was fun. And so
Sure sounds like it was fun.
uh,
Doesn't
it
sound at
was a
all
good, it
like
was
it
a
was
good,
an upsetting experience.
it was a good movie. That's another one where it's like it's a very solidly made movie, and it as I get older, it's impressive to me when I see these movies where like a single actor holds like at least 70% of the
Yeah,
screen
he actually
time
carried the movie by himself. Yeah, I
by
know.
themselves. Like
Yeah,
that's absolutely impressive to me.
yeah.
And so
Scary enough doing it with other actors.
going back to that subject or that question that you asked me of, does he have a style? Another style that I would say that this has with Forrest Gump is serious.
Yeah,
Like he does stuff that have a sense of weight, a
yeah,
sense of like with Forrest Gump, it's about the war, it's about Jenny. Like
yeah,
there are serious aspects in a movie that's capable of having fun.
yeah,
This this I think touches on the same thing where it has the crash, it has the isolation on the island,
yeah.
his descent into madness, and then his return to
He also
society.
seems to.
But it's like it still has those moments where it's like it's enjoyable, I
Yeah,
guess is the word.
he seems to like to tell a story about like one figure, like one central important. Because he's got. I know he did another one, which I can't imagine you watched, but I think he did the movie about Captain Sully, and it was kind of a similar. I think he might have done Flight with Denzel Washington, and it was the same idea of it's one guy and it's his
He
story,
did.
and
He
yeah,
did do Flight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that one reminded me a lot of Castaway. I don't know why. There was something about it that really reminded me of Castaway. But
Um,
go ahead.
my
Sorry, Castaway. Go on. Sorry, I lost it.
I was gonna say, um, anyone who hasn't watched it, I would definitely. That's one that I would recommend, which is a perfect leaping point into my final one that I have not seen, or had not seen. I have now seen, and I kind of wish that I hadn't,
it
because it wasn't very good, in my opinion. Of the ones that I've talked about today, I
was
think it's
bad.
his
It was a
worst.
bad movie.
I think it's his worst. Is
I
The
don't know.
Witches,
I saw Dumbo. Dumbo was pretty not Dumbo. The Pinocchio. Pinocchio was pretty
Pinocchio.
bad.
I said of the ones that I've watched today.
Oh, fair. Yeah, yeah.
And no,
Witches.
I've watched Pinocchio and I've watched The Witches. I think this one's worse.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, um, it's just what can I say?
Drek.
Boring.
Donkey Kaka.
Not very good. I didn't. It wasn't. It didn't do it for me. I watched the like not this week, but like generally speaking, I have seen the original,
Yeah,
and
it's
I
awful.
remember enjoying that one far more. This
Enjoying is
one
a
makes
generous term, but all right.
experiencing,
Yeah.
if you prefer. This one it may it so I'm not gonna do a full recap because I don't want to.
Fine.
Um,
Everyone
but
knows the witches. They go to a
there's
hotel. The kid gets turned to a mouse. That's the
in the
Cole's
original
Notes version.
version, they very much were like, yeah, they're witches. In this version, again, unless I missed something because I was not my interest wasn't held enough to catch it all. At a certain point, the grandmother is like, yeah, the witches are essentially demons who like take the form of women and like that's what makes them witches. But
Well,
because like
to be fair, now that I've thought this out a bit, traditionally speaking, witches were I thought to be like a form of demon, or like they met
they
a
were thought to be they were thought
pat
to
with
be
demon.
spawn of hell.
Yeah, so I guess maybe that's where the I don't know. That does sound weird. It would just be like they're
Um,
witches. In the original, they were just witches. They just existed. It was just a fact
yeah,
of
I
life.
don't. But they like in the
There
original, they hate
wasn't a
children.
yeah, there wasn't a bunch of
They
explanation
want
there.
to. But so again, and in the original, I don't remember if there's like a parent character that's on the children's side.
Yes,
Um,
there's the grandmother. The grandmother is a character in the original.
oh, the grandmother is a character in the original. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the
Um,
parents, his parents died. I've read the book too,
yeah,
so
in this version they
yeah,
did
I
as
can't
well.
remember how they died in the
Um,
original. It's been a long
uh,
time.
um. So at a certain point, his grandmother gives our main character a pet rat or a pet mouse rather, who you later end up finding out is also a child that just stayed quiet this entire time because talking rodents are not a common thing, and one finding one probably wouldn't end up well for said mouse.
Sure, yeah, that sounds
So
about right.
I understand that judgment call.
Yeah.
Um, that makes sense to me. Um, and boy gets turned into mouse, other boy gets turned into mouse. There's a lot of children getting turned into mice in this one. And adventure happens. They stop the witches. Um and the big difference that I remember in this one from the last one or from the first one from the original one, words are hard, is I seem to remember that in the original, uh, the boy turns back into
A boy.
a boy at the end, but
That's what I remember.
in this one they stay mice,
I remember that from the
and
original
like
book too. I'm pretty sure
and
they turn back into humans.
like the at the end, uh, so there's a point where basically where the Chris Rock is the narrator voice of the boy. And so there's a point near the end where the boy is like, so grandma, how long do mice typically live? And the grandma's like, about 3 years if you're a normal mouse, but you're like a special like human mouse, so you'll probably live at least double that. And I'm like, wow, that's dark. This 6-year-old
So
boy gets to have, or this not 6-year-old, but this child gets to have like a shortened length. That's upsetting. Um,
hold on, time out. He doesn't get turned back into a boy. Why? Is there not? Is the spell? Why don't they? Is that not the point of this? They beat the witch. They turn back into a human. Like, why don't they turn back
so
into a human?
the potion is like a permanent change thing. The idea was that the witches were gonna slip this. Basically, we're gonna open a candy store. Because the idea in this movie is basically these witches lure in children with candy, and then like change them into animals and like
Eat
kill
them.
them,
Eat them.
basically
Yeah.
eat them, kill them, make them go away.
In the original, it's
Whatever
eat
the
them.
in this version, it's eat them, kill them, make them go away. They just want children to not exist anymore.
Ah.
So in the very beginning of the movie, or near the beginning of the movie, when you had the grandmother explaining to the grandson about all the witches and everything and what's up with them, she tells the story about how when her and her friend were kids, her friend got turned into a chicken,
Oh, gotcha.
like a super big chicken. And the grandmother got away from the witch basically. So then when the witch, it's the head witch, the The one that's a really famous actress that you definitely know,
It's Anne
and that I
Hathaway.
can't. That's it, Anne Hathaway.
It's Anne Hathaway.
Um, when Anne Hathaway sees the grandmother as an adult, she's like, "I recognize you," and she ends up being like, "Oh, you're the friend of the one that I turned into a chicken. You're the one that got away." Um, and um, so then basically you find out that the witch's plot is to open a candy store, lure children in, and the candy will have like a bit of the potion in it that turns the kids into mice.
Gotcha.
And it's a not reversible potion.
Gotcha.
And so at a certain point, they try to steal like they steal some of the potion and bring it to the grandma, so the grandma can try and make like a cure for the potion, like an antidote or a reverse, and she's not able to. And so that's kind of the thing is they can't
so is the fact
reverse
that he
it.
can't turn back into a human like a big twist?
Well, what not it is, I guess, at that moment where she's like, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't make it. Like I can't
Like
do
that's
it.
a like,
Um,
and this is
but
a
but
happy
what's
ending,
weird?
right? Like that's a really
What's
depressing ending.
what's weird about it is that like he's like, I'm actually happy that I this is the bravest. I've been the bravest as a mouse than braver as a mouse than I was as a human. Like this is actually good, and I
Okay,
kind of like, and I don't have to go to school now, and
that's really
and
fucked
I get to
up.
just hang out and like
All
do
right,
whatever I want,
I don't like this. This
and
this
it's like
is this is
the
weird. I don't like it.
grandma's like, like, or he's like, I can still live with you, grandma, right? And he's like, my friends can too. And she's like, yeah, of course. Like when I see you, I don't see a mouse, I just see you. And it's like, it feels like it's supposed to be like this, like metaphor for something.
No, this just sounds
And
bad. This sounds like a bad movie.
so then at the very end, you see the grandma. It's like been a couple years, and you see the mouse boy who is now voiced by Chris Rock. Chris Rock, I think it's Chris Rock. Um, I think it's Chris Rock. I don't actually know. I didn't bother to look it up. He has a very recognizable voice that I definitely should know.
I'm just gonna believe you that it's Chris Rock. Go on.
And uh, It sounds like because one of the things that they found in the head witch's room was a list of like all the known existing witches.
So they're gonna
So
go
like
witch
at the
hunting.
end, essentially, essentially at the end of the movie, like they have this plan. They've been working on this plan or whatever. And it sounds like it's like them setting up for them to be going and hunting down these witches and like either turning them
So
into
they
something
set
or
up for a sequel. Oh, that's cute.
I don't know if it's for a sequel, but it's certainly that's
The
that's how
witches,
it ends.
the WCU, the Witch Cinematic Universe, setting up for a sequel.
So I didn't really care for this movie. I don't think it has a happy ending.
No, it doesn't
Um,
sound like it does. As it's being described to me, it sounds like a horrifying ending.
boy gets turned into mouse. Oh, I mean, you want to talk horrifying? The one boy's parents. So uh, wh- there's the three mice character. There's the little girl who was the mouse from the beginning of the movie.
Mhm.
There's the fat little boy who was eating chocolate that the witches turned into a mouse. Like they were the one that they
Yeah,
tested the
he's the
potion
one
on.
who, in the original movie, he's the first kid you get turned into, and he's all horrifying. It's all horrifying looking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Ugh.
And then there's our main character mouse.
Yeah.
So the fat little boy had parents. And at a certain point, the grandma's like, this is your son," and like they're like, crazy lady," because the mouse doesn't talk,
So
right?
as
Like he
far as
doesn't
they're
talk to
concerned,
them.
their kid got murdered.
As
That's
far
all
as
they're
they're
saying. Yeah.
concerned, well, no. At that point, they're just like our kid, like we don't know where he is, and so then there's a point later in the movie where, he does talk to them as a mouse, and they're like, "Ah," and like run off, and like abandon him. So it's like in terms of like what are the happy endings for these characters? The little girl was an orphan who gets to have food and a shelter. So yeah, she's a mouse, but she has food and shelter. So okay, I could maybe see how that's a little bit happier than what her life might have been. Um, Grandson still gets to be with his grandmother, so I guess that's nice.
That's nice,
I
I
guess.
guess.
But fat little boy who likes to eat food loses his parents and gets to live with two other mice children. That sounds awful.
Right? That sounds like
That sounds
bad.
like a very bad ending.
So okay. Wrapping
So
up.
those are my movies.
Do you have any final thoughts on Bobby Zemeckis before I move
Of
on
the
to
movies
mine?
that I saw, I like most of them.
That's fair.
And The Witches, I don't feel like it's his fault necessarily. I just don't know that he was the right director for that project.
Fair enough.
I think I think it would have been interesting to see your director do that project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he would have made it dark. Well,
Or
maybe he
say
wouldn't have. Maybe he wouldn't
or
get as
Sam
bad.
Raimi.
Or Sam Raimi. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Sam Raimi would have been twisted.
So moving into my director.
Do
If you
do
can't see,
do do do
I'm
do
doing wiggly
do
fingers.
do.
I shall be talking about Tim Burton because I have talked about his movies a lot on this podcast, and I
Oh, you mean
always
the guy who made The Nightmare Before Christmas, right?
he did not make The Nightmare Before Christmas. That's actually Henry Selick. Henry Selick is the guy who directed. Henry Selick also directed James and the Giant Peach, which Tim Burton also produced. Um, we're going to talk about Tim Burton's stop motion, but we're going to kind of do this in an order. Tim Burton, I'll start off by doing what I did with Jordan, which is um, everyone thinks he has a style, and that's my point. That's why I asked you what you thought Bob Zemeckis' style was. Um, because everyone automatically says, "Oh, Tim Burton, he's got that gothic kind of like hot topic, like style to him, that weirdness." And not of the movies I saw, because I watched probably way more than you did. I think I watched 6 or 7 of them. I lost count. Really, only half of them are sort of dark and gothic, and the other half weren't actually. And I'm gonna zip through a couple up top. I really want to talk about Pee Wee Herman, because Tim Burton's first movie is Pee Wee Herman, Pee Wee's Big Adventure,
That's
and
weird.
I just here's my thing about Pee. Here's the thing about Pee Wee Herman. I don't get Pee Wee Herman. I don't get the joke. Like, I particularly now having watched this, I don't understand. It's not especially clear. Like, he acts like a child, but interacts with the world like an adult. Like, everyone kind of treats him like he's an eccentric adult, but he has childlike behaviors and dispositions, and his main goal is to get his bike back, which was stolen.
Hey, Gabby.
And there's just a lot of really weird, like there's this one really long scene of Pee Wee Herman at the Alamo, where it's just this really long scene of him going through this tour, and this woman saying all these facts about the Alamo, and then it gets to the end of the tour, and he's like, and the scene is like 2-3 minutes long, and it gets to the end of it, and he's like, does the Alamo, where's the basement? And she's like, the Alamo doesn't have a basement, and then they all laugh in his face, and then the scene ends. And then the follow up to that is in the next scene, he's at the bus stop and he's meeting a character he's met previously in the movie. And he's like, "Did you know that the Alamo doesn't have a basement?" And he's really sad about it. And it's weird and it doesn't really make any sense, and it's like, but that movie's like really weird and whimsical, and like, yeah, there's some really interesting stuff with stop motion, where like you're like, "Oh, I see why he became interested in that." And there's a lot of stop motion stuff in his early movies, and just overall, I just don't like Pee Wee Herman. I don't get him. I don't get it. I don't get what the joke is. I don't think he's funny. I don't. There's like a couple of scenes that were funny. Like, I will admit there was one where he's in Texas. And he's like, "Oh, I'm in Texas. I'll prove that I'm in Texas." And he goes, "Da da da, where da da," and he holds the phone out, and everyone goes, "Deep in the heart of Texas." And I was like, "That's funny. That's a funny joke." And yeah, it's really weird. There's a lot of jokes where like, I they feel tried and like hackneyed, but I can't tell if like this is where they like, so like he at one point he goes to a biker bar, and he gets tossed at the biker bar, and he goes to leave, and he accidentally knocks over the motorcycles, and they all fall over. You've seen
Oh
that,
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Wild Hogs.
yeah. And I'm like, well, that came out. So it's like, is this original or is it derivative? It feels derivative, but maybe that's because I'm watching it 20 years in the 30 years in the future or whatever. Um, and just yeah, I just don't get. And so then that leads me to his second film. And I know we said we weren't going to do superheroes, but I can't talk about Tim Burton and not talk about Batman. Very briefly.
Uh,
Very briefly, I promise. I promise. I just want to
we've
say,
already done Batman
just
though.
just in contrast, I just because I was so fascinated. It's just in contrast to how much I can't stand Batman Returns. I actually loved Batman the movie, and I don't know if it's because it's like there's a Joker's in it. Jack Nicholson,
Jack Nicholson.
Jack
Oh man,
Nicholson.
I love Jack Nicholson, mate.
Um, Jack Nicholson as the Joker is phenomenal. He's so good. Like you could just see how he inspired the Joker for decades in like a positive way. Like Mark Hamill's Joker takes everything from the Jack Nicholson Joker. His theatricality, like he's so good. You forget that the climax of the movie is just him and the Batman walking upstairs. That's all it is. It's just they're just walking up the stairs for like 10 minutes. Like the Joker walks up the stairs and the Batman slowly truds up behind him. So many stairs. And
The
it's really good.
Batman.
And it's much more, in my opinion, subdued. It's a much more subdued version of the just a weird, upsetting awfulness that is Batman Returns. And then after that, I watched before that I watched Beetlejuice, which
Beetlejuice,
no,
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice,
no, shh. You're not supposed to say the third, and you can't say it. Shh, shh, shh. No, you can't. We don't want that. No,
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
no, 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 no. We're not gonna say that. We don't want that kind of trouble around here. We don't want to. We don't want to invite that guy. But no, I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I was like, it's just. I know it's for all the reasons that I remember not liking it. I think the only thing of Beetlejuice I liked was the cartoon. And I don't think I ever liked. I think I tried to make myself like the movie because I liked the cartoon. Because I could not stand this movie. It was just gross
I
and weird and awful and like Michael
I don't
Keaton is funny. He's hilarious. He's got some good one-liners, but he's just a disgusting character.
I don't know that I've ever actually watched Beetlejuice. I certainly have no memory of it.
I can recall watching it at ours place when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I can recall watching it there. Um,
I
but
don't. I have no
I just
memory.
remember it used to scare the pants off of me. I never liked it. It was like it's right up there with the Adams Family, which just I just never cared for the Adams Family. It's just always something off-putting about it. I did not enjoy it. Um, so yeah, so those I think I just didn't do it for me. And then what was the other one I watched? Oh, Sweeney Todd. I watched Sweeney Todd, and that's kind of what I really want.
Oh,
This was just an excuse to watch Sweeney Todd and for me to talk about how much I love Sweeney Todd. I love Sweeney Todd. And it's funny that movie. I like that movie in spite of the fact that it's not a good adaptation of Sweeney Todd. It's a very bad adaptation of Sweeney Todd because of the cast of it. A lot of it doesn't really make any sense. So like, just like as an example, the character that Sacha Baron Cohen plays, the Italian,
yeah.
he in the play in the musical is fat. He's supposed to be quite large. So when Mrs. Lovett sings about cooking him into a pie, in the next song, and she starts with the song of such a nice plump face. He doesn't really have a plump face because Sacha Baron Cohen is tall and thin. So those lyrics now don't make any sense.
They
Or
don't really match up. Yeah.
no, or another example is Sacha Baron Cohen is a charlatan. He shows up to blackmail Sweeney Todd, and he says how he worked for him when he was a kid, but like Sacha Baron Cohen is the same age as Johnny Depp, or at least looks like he's the same age as Johnny Depp. So those lines now don't make any sense, but they've clearly just been taken. I think that's an example of people always say how some things don't work when you take them from stage to screen, and that's just Mrs. Lovett, both Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd are supposed to be old. Like they're supposed to be old people. Like Sweeney Todd's supposed to be an old man, and because he's supposed to have been gone for like 15 years, right? And Mrs. Lovett is supposed to be like an older woman in the original play. I think I told you she's played by Angela Lansbury. Like she's an older
Yeah.
woman, so you're not really supposed to. Her being in love with Sweeney Todd is supposed to be weird, because she's why would he be into her? She's like eccentric and crazy and not
She's
like
supposed to be like his mother.
yeah, that's kind of the idea, right? And so it's weird that so when she's in love with him, it's supposed to be weird, and so yeah, it's just not believable. They also when it they've cut out all of the stuff involving Joanna out of the movie, so she has a bunch of songs. Like they only give her like one song, which is the Green Finch and Linnet Bird, and they cut out all of her other songs, and they cut out all of the duets between her and Anthony. So in that movie, her and Anthony don't share a single line of dialogue until the end, and he's supposed to be in love with her, right? He's supposed to want to whisk her away, and so when and in the song where he's like, I had him, the throat was bare beneath my, that one.
Yeah, of course I know that
Yeah,
song.
when he bursts in, there's a previous scene prior to that where he actually has a duet with Joanna, which is where they fall in love. So they don't meet each other at all in the movie.
That seems wrong.
Yeah, right. And yeah, and there's just a lot of that, and also there's a lot of explanation. So like when he towards the end when he sends Anthony off to go get her to save her from the house, he takes a letter to the judge that you don't see in the
Movie?
yeah, that you don't see in the movie, but in the play it's basically Sweeney Todd has essentially given up Joanna and is so blinded by rage and revenge that he's willing to use her as bait, basically. So he sends this letter being like, yeah, the sailor is gonna kidnap her and molest her. You should. I've convinced him to bring her here. You should show up here, and that's when he gets him. And he reveals himself as Benjamin Barker. So it's like, yeah, in the movie they don't say that. So Judge Turpin just kind of shows up at his place for like no reason. He's just like, oh, I'm here now. Why is he here? I don't understand. Why is he here? I'm confused. And I just when it comes to that, also Johnny Depp is not the vocal register. Sweeney Todd is meant to be a deep like baritone, and he's got a much higher register. So it's like, in terms of being a good rendition of the music, it's not good, but I like it because it's in my key. So when I'm singing along to the music, I can hit the same key as I can. And yeah, I really like that movie. And the big part of this for me was reminding myself that I like Tim Burton movies. I was like
that they're not all bad.
They're not all bad, because I was starting to be like, I think I hate Tim Burton movies, and so moving along into the stuff I hadn't seen. The first one I really want to talk about is Big Fish. I cannot recommend Big Fish enough. Big Fish is so good.
Tell me about it.
Big Fish basically it's Ian McGregor.
Okay, that's an immediate check in the right box.
He basically plays this man. It's a story of a son and his father, and immediately I'm hooked because I love a good story about his son and his father. Sorry, I gotta take a quick sip. My throat is getting dry for some reason.
Father and son.
Father and son, yeah. And so it's about basically this guy has told stories and tales to his son, and they're tall tales. They're tall tales of like he was traveling. They're like folk tales, basically, kind of similar in a vein to like like the Song of the South style, like old folk tales of like I was walking down the street and I ran into this giant and I was friends with the giant and whatever. And as this and they're really like elaborate, like almost like fairy tales kind of stories. And he's told his son these stories a million times, and the son is sick to death of them. And the dad is likable and charming, but he sort of steals the spotlight and steals the attention away from the son. The son is really resentful of this, and so they have they've broken up. Not broken up, but he hasn't spoken to the father in like years at this point, and the father is dying of a unrelated disease. unrelated, of a disease, I think cancer or something, of an unimportant disease is what I meant to say.
It's unrelated. It's fine.
It's very much related to the story. And so he goes back. He goes back to see his dad, and basically tries to get him to tell him like the true version, so he can find out who his dad actually is. Because he's like, I don't know who you are because I've only ever heard the fake versions of these stories. What actually happened? Like what this is clearly not true. And you get to see these stories, and they're all like big elaborate stories, and they're kind of fun because you're watching these stories and like as an audience member that they're not real. Like at one point he meets a giant, and you're like, well, it's obviously not a giant. It was probably just a really tall man.
Yeah.
And it becomes a question of like what is real and what isn't real and stuff. And yeah, Ian McGregor plays the dad, and at a certain point it's multi-layered. Sometimes it's the dad in the present telling the story. Sometimes it's Ian McGregor telling the story. Like sometimes Helena Bonham Carter shows up at one point because it's a Tim Burton movie. And what's really funny is he does reuse a lot of actors, and it's not just Helena Bonham Carter and
Johnny Depp.
Danny DeVito he uses a lot. Alan Arkin, like uses a bunch of people who show up consistently in his movies. And so yeah,
The two big ones on my end were Christopher Lloyd and Tom Hanks.
Yeah, Tom Hanks a lot. But yeah, so you see these stories, and they're all kind of, and again, as the audience that they're not real. And so as the movie goes on, the son, we see these stories, and the son is basically like uncovering stuff in his office, and he's kind of finding out the real story. And it's like, yeah, the real story isn't as interesting. It's not as fun to know the true story.
Right.
The made up one is way more fun. And
of course.
He eventually goes and he sees in the paperwork that he's been paying, like, he basically bought, I should say, earlier in the movie, there's a point where he's traveling along this road, and he hits this fork in the road. And it's the story of the giant's like, he's traveling with this giant, and the giant's like, well, if you go down the road, you're just going to ditch me. And he's like, no, keep my stuff. I want to go see what's down this road because everyone's too scared to go down this road. And he goes down this road, and it's like a real dark and scary place. And he walks under this town, and I can't remember what the name of the town is, but it's this town, and they're like, oh, you're I forget what his name is, but you're such and such. You're Ian McGregor. You're here too early. You're supposed to be here, but you're here too early. And he's a guy who wants to travel the world and like explore and stuff, and he tries to like settle in this town. And he just can't do it. He just can't. He wants to travel, so he eventually, when he first arrives there, they like take off his shoes and like toss it over this like power pole or whatever, and it's supposed to signify that signifies you don't leave because no one in the town wears shoes. And so he eventually gets bored and he leaves. And so then later on in the movie, the son discovers that he owns this entire town, basically, the town that he had arrived at too early. He owns this entire town. And so the son goes there and meets, when the dad was there, he had met this girl who was 10 years younger than him. So Ian McGregor, there's this bit where he's a kid and he starts to like develop this, what he calls gigantism, where he's just like bigger than everybody. And so in order to represent that, he goes from being a kid to just being Ian McGregor. But he's like, oh, I'm 18, but he's like fully adult Ian McGregor. And so he meets this little girl, and she's like, oh, I'm 8, I'm 10 years I'm 10 years younger than you. And I'm like, oh, that's clearly because he has a wife. Oh, I'm like, oh, that's his wife. And then he gets whatever. He leaves the town, and he goes and him and the giant go and join the circus. And what's really interesting is Danny DeVito's there as the ringleader. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting that later on in Dumbo, when he had the ringleader in Dumbo, he's also the ringleader in that, and Tim Burton also directed Dumbo. And I was like, I wonder if that's a reference. I don't imagine it is. It's probably just a coincidence, but I'm like, that's a really interesting coincidence.
Could be a callback.
But so yeah, so he leaves this town that he's gone too early in, and he goes and he sees this. He attends this circus, and he sees this woman who he's like, I looked into her eyes and I determined that that's my wife. She's going to be my wife. She's the one who's going to be my wife. I know it. And so he basically goes to this ringleader and he's like, tell me about this girl that's going to be my wife. And he's like, if you come and work for me, I will give you one piece of information about her a month if you work for me. And he's like, deal. And so Ian McGregor ends up working for him for like 3 years, and eventually he gets all the information he wants, and he goes and he meets her, and she's engaged to get married to the biggest dick from his town, and
Of course.
he ends up winning her over, and they get married or whatever. Um, and so flash forward to later in the story, later in the movie, the son has gone to this town that the dad, and he's finding out the story of him buying the town, and it's being told in the like magic folk, like the myth way, like it's the myth story, like not what actually happened story. And basically it's of the time he came to this town twice, once too early and once too late. And he long story short, he marries the wife, has a kid, and in order to fulfill his need to travel, becomes a traveling salesman. And so on one of his routes, he discovers the town. He comes back too late, and he buys up the town, all except for this one house, which he goes to, and it turns out it's the little girl from earlier, who was 10 years younger than
Right.
him, who is played by Helena Bonham Carter. And it's sort of implied that he cheated on the wife with her, basically. That he's paid for this second life and this second girlfriend or whatever, and he had an affair with this woman. But in the story, he shows up, and the way she tells it is that like he in order to convince her to sell the house, basically like was really nice to her and kind to her, and stuck around and like rebuilt the house for her
Seduced her.
and did all this stuff. And then like right when she's about to make a move, like gallantly and like chivalrously is like, no, I love my wife and cannot cheat on my wife. And the way the story is told, it sounds like it's obvious bullshit. Like, and that's what's kind of neat about these stories, is they all sound like obvious bullshit, but the story is obviously nicer, and that's kind of the theme of it. Is the story is so much more interesting, and she gets to the end of the story, and it's sort of implied that we as the audience have seen the mythical fictional version, and he heard the actual version. And she's like, or no, she tells it the mythical way. And then later on, because the dad's dying, he's finally super sick, and he's like in the hospital, and he goes and he's talking to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, I remember the day you were born. And he tells this really like, oh, your dad wasn't there, he was off on like a business trip, and he tells it very coldly and very like distantly. And he's like,
Clinically.
yeah, clinically, yeah. And he's like, yeah, that's the story. It's far less interesting that way, right? It's not nearly as much fun as, because the story he tells him is, oh, he used his ring to catch this mythical fish in this pond, and there's this big huge story. Hold on, I'm just trying to think.
Sounds fun.
I feel like I'm missing. So it gets to the end. Oh, that was it. Earlier in the movie, the very first story the dad tells is how when he was a kid, he knew everyone looked into the eye of this witch and saw the day they were gonna die. The one guy saw he would die as a young man on the toilet, and then he did. The guy who turns out is the guy that the dad's wife was originally going to marry. He died as a young man on a toilet, and he saw that in the witch's eye. And so the Ian McGregor sees into this witch's eye and sees how he's going to die. And so every time he gets into trouble, he's like, no, I knew I wasn't going to die because I saw in the witch's eye. And so earlier in the movie when when the son shows up to see the dad, he's like, oh, I'm dying, or I'm not gonna die here. He's like, oh, why is that? Because I saw it in the witch's eye. And so then it gets to the end, and the dad's like dying, basically he's about to die, and he asked the son, oh, how do I go? And the son's like, what? He's like, how does it happen? And so the son starts to tell the story of how the dad wakes up and he saves him from, oh my god, I'm gonna get misty describing it, but he rescues him from the hospital, and they burst out, and like they're trying to escape, and it's this big huge chase sequence of all the doctors are trying to get them, and they're all in huge trouble, and they're all trying to get out. And he's like, and I wheel you down, and we get to the river, and I wheel you onto the river, and I push you on the river, and you transform into a big trout, and you become the big fish that you always were. And
Oh,
I'm in my thing, and I'm like hacking out, and I'm crying, and I'm coughing, and I'm crying, and I'm like, oh my god. That was like such an emotional ending. I was like, oh my god. And so when I'm like, yeah, not all of Tim Burton's movies. It's just really sentimental and emotional movie, and it's like, yeah, that's I was reading about, and that's very much the intent and what Tim Burton wanted to do. And it's funny because this was a movie that I've wanted to watch for years, and I never got around to it because I read this book when I was a kid, and I love this book. It's a great book as well. Um, and yeah, it's really whimsical and fantastical. And so when I'm like, yeah, Tim Burton's kind of got like two flavors: whimsy and gothic awfulness. Um, and nothing, and then those are kind of his two styles. And this was very sentimental, and it was very surprising how much I was invested in it emotionally, because like a couple of his other movies really wanted that, and just it wasn't doing it. I was like, I wanted to be that. And so then my next one that I saw, which I was surprised by how much I liked, was Ed Wood. I watched Ed Wood, which is basically it's a biopic about this old black and white um, film director who he was a cross dresser, and he was a real like eccentric guy. He was friends with Bela Lugosi, the guy who plays Dracula, and
okay.
it was really good. I was really struck by like it's one of those movies where like Tim Burton clearly saw something of himself in this guy, in the sense that like clearly by that point, because this is sort of post Beetlejuice and Batman, and he had developed that identity of being an eccentric guy. So clearly he saw something in this, and what's interesting is all of these, a lot of these movies, this one and the next one I'm going to talk about, Sleepy Hollow, made me go, oh yeah, Johnny Depp's a good actor. Remember when we used to think that Johnny Depp was a good actor? This movie reminded me of that time, because like from Sweeney Todd to he's Ed Wood to Sleepy Hollow, like he's phenomenal. Like he's a different guy. He disappears into these roles, and I kind of was like, oh yeah, we used to think of him like um
I mean, I still think he's a good actor. I just think he's oversaturated and in too many things.
I don't think he's been a good actor for a while. He hasn't been anything good for a while, and he's just been off the map since the whole thing.
Thing.
Um, so yeah, so I was struck by how much I was like, oh yeah, that was the one where I was like, oh man, maybe I don't hate all of Tim Burton's movies, but I really want to talk about my next one I hadn't seen. We're gonna that one I quick thoughts. This one I'm gonna go into a bit more detail. Sleepy Hollow. Um, I don't imagine you've ever seen Sleepy Hollow.
No, but I'm feeling sleepy.
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow's good. It's basically it's really funny because it made me realize I don't actually know the legend of the Sleepy Hollow beyond Ichabod Crane, the Headless Horseman, and
Isn't that where the Toad's Wild Ride comes from?
that's part of. Well, that's the Disney one. Disney. That's the Wind of the
Yeah.
Willows. Yeah, they did it in two parts. They did the first half is the Wind of the Willows. Second half is the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And it's good. It's very, very funny because one of the things about Sweeney Todd that struck me was just how graphically violent it was, and cartoonishly and over the toply violent. And yeah, Sleepy Hollow is no exception, man. They're like lopping off heads, and it's quite good. It's not just about Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman, but there's like a conspiracy. I don't want to. It's one of those ones that I'm actually going to recommend to you, and I don't want to give away the twist to it. But it's really quite good. It's Ichabod Crane is hired to go investigate Sleepy Hollow. There's a series of decapitations. In this story, he's a police officer. He's a constable who is basically he is into forensic science, and he is ahead of his time. And in terms of his forensic science, everyone thinks he's kind of a quack, and he gets sent off to Sleepy Hollow, where there's been this like mysterious spree of decapitations, and he shows up thinking it's just a traditional serial killer, and they're like, "Oh no, it's a ghost," and he's like, "No, it's not a ghost. No, seriously, it's a ghost of a headless guy." And it's really funny. I didn't know that there was a history to Sleepy, like the headless horseman, like he had a backstory, but turns out he's got a backstory, and this movie is actually pretty faithful to it. He's a what's called a Haitian. He's like a German soldier. Basically, it takes place like just after the American Civil War, and he was a German soldier, mercenary for hire, basically, that the British would hire to help them win the Revolutionary War, to quash the rebellion. And so he was in that town just slaughtering people, and they managed to overpower him and cut his head off, and that's how he became the Headless Horseman. And so there's this, as the movie goes on, they unravel this conspiracy, and it turns out that, well, yes, the Headless Horseman is very real, and he's a ghost, and he's trying to murder people. Who he's murdering and why he's murdering them, there's a mystery afoot. And it got me. It ducked me and it weaved me. I thought I knew who it was, and it subverted me. It got me. And anytime a twist gets me, I have to give it props. And Johnny Depp is really good in it, and it's honestly really good. And that one very much is like, yeah, it's a gothic. That's one of those ones where it's gothic. And it's got that sort of hot topic style of like, this is what goth people, Tim Burton. And when people think of Tim Burton, that and Sweeney Todd, it's like, this is what people think of when they think of Tim Burton.
I mean, that and The Nightmare Before Christmas, because his name is plastered all over it.
Yeah, well, when I read about that, the director sort of said that he created the characters that he wrote this story outline. So like it comes from him and he produced it. So it's like it comes from him, so that's why they put his name on it. That and he was pretty famous at that point, so they knew he would bring in the money. But speaking of Nightmare Before Christmas, I just want to hit up two of his animated movies, which you've seen Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie, right?
Frankenweenie, no. Corpse Bride, I think so.
I thought you had seen Frankenweenie. Corpse Bride, I didn't care for. I didn't think it was very good. It's too short, and I rarely say that, but it's like an hour 17. It should have been an hour and a half, hour 40. And it just like rapid fires through stuff so quickly that you don't have time to care about anything. It also, The Corpse Bride also really wants to be associated with A Nightmare Before Christmas. It really
Pardon
wants.
you.
Yeah, pardon me. Let me say that again. Sorry. Corpse Bride really wants to be associated with A Nightmare Before Christmas. Like it really wants you to think of A Nightmare Before Christmas when you're watching it. It just.
I mean, some people's headcanons is that the main character from Corpse Bride becomes Jack Skellington.
I had that. What's really funny? You said that. I had that thought independently because they all look like all the art style, the characters. They're all made to evoke Nightmare Before Christmas. There's no way.
Absolutely.
There's no way they weren't.
Absolutely, they were.
It wants you to think of it. And the music, I didn't think there was one song that's good. And it's the one where they're talking about how the Corpse Bride died.
The Bones of the Day.
Yeah. Other than that, the music's forgettable. It's not very good.
That's the one song that I like
the
from
bad
that
guy
one as well.
is nothing. There's just nothing. There's no substance
Yeah.
to it. It's just like this.
It's a movie that I have no strong feelings about one way or the other. It's fine.
It's a fine movie. It's just it's
nothing to write home about.
Like when you have such a strong, it's one of those like, yeah, his movies are kind of hit and miss where it's like, but for me, I dislike more of his later stuff than I did, or his early stuff than I did his later stuff. But and then finally, Frankenweenie. I quite like Frankenweenie. I was impressed by it. The other thing about both Frankenweenie and Ed Wood is they're both in black and white. And they're in black and white for aesthetic reasons, which is we talked about previously. Why do something in black and white when you can do something in color today? And those are movies that, for aesthetically, Frankenweenie is meant to evoke a Frankenstein movie. So it's in black and white, and it works. It absolutely works. And Ed Wood, yeah, it really evokes that era of movie. Even though I'm pretty sure, maybe not, I don't know. But by the time he was making those movies, I'm pretty sure some of them were color. But yeah, it creates a certain atmosphere and a certain style. It's like, see, stylistically, I get this, but it just makes them so different And that's the thing. Ultimately, to wrap up on Tim Burton, I was surprised by how varied his style and aesthetic was. Like they're not all the same. Like whereas like if I and part when I thought of this challenge up was that it made me think of Wes Anderson, where every single one of Wes Anderson's movies are almost exactly the same in terms of tone and style. Like
Right.
I can put a Wes Anderson movie on and you would know it was a Wes Anderson movie. And it's the
Or
same thing with
Michael
Tarantino
Bay.
or Michael Bay. Yeah, whereas like every one of his movies are more or less the same. They're hyper masculine, they're aggressive. Same thing with Zack
Eh,
Snyder. Like they're gonna be in slow motion. Like you could tell that's a Zack Snyder film. And with Tim Burton, if I played for you Big Fish and I told you I didn't tell you it was a Tim Burton movie, you wouldn't have known it was a Tim Burton movie. It's one of those kinds
Probably
of
not.
movies. And I'm
You're probably correct. I would probably not know that.
and I'm not sure if that's the mark of a good director or like a strong director or if you like like do you want your director like yeah like with Sam Raimi you could tell that's a Sam Raimi movie like
Yeah.
I guess that has their own pluses and
I think it
minuses.
depends. Yeah, I think it depends on the director.
So okay, to sum up to wrap up favorite directors and before we move into assignments for next week, um, do you like Bob Zemeckis more or less than you did before, or the same? Would you say?
I'd say the same.
Have you changed your opinion at all on his filmmaking style?
Um, my the only change that I would say is that he's not perfect.
No, no director is. I mean,
Like
my guy's definitely. I was gonna one of the ones I was gonna watch was Dark Shadows because
there's
I remember how much we hated that movie. Um,
there's movies that he's made that I don't necessarily think are great, but overall he's good.
I was surprised by how much how many of I thought I was gonna hate. Like I thought for sure I was gonna hate Sleepy Hollow and Ed Wood. So I was surprised by the amount that I genuinely liked, and I was surprised by how varied his movies are. Like
Mm.
when we first were first looking at this challenge, we talked about Steven Spielberg, and I looked at him because he had the most varied filmography. So I was really
Yeah,
impressed by how varied Tim Burton's was. But with that having been said, moving into assignments for next week. The assignment for next week, because I want something nice and easy. I want something nice and easy. We're going to be talking about and digestible. We're going to talk animation for next week. But there's going to be a twist. I want you to pick, Jordan, and audience at home. I want you to watch animation that you're pretty sure nobody's heard of or seen. And I want you to pick one that you've seen, that you're positive or you're pretty sure nobody's seen. And then I want you to pick one that you're
mm.
pretty sure that no one's seen and you haven't seen. And here's the kicker: it doesn't have to be movies, as always. Um, it doesn't have to be television. Um, it can be as long as it's a piece of animation or even you know what, we're flexible with the rules. It involves animation, and you're pretty positive nobody's seen it. Pick some stuff.
Mm.
We're loosening on the numbers, but pick some stuff you haven't seen. Pick some stuff you've seen. We're gonna talk about that next week.
I
Think
have
about
some
that.
ideas. I have some
Um,
thoughts.
but that's coming next week. Next Saturday we'll be back.
Get
Thank.
excited. Get
So,
excited.
um, with that having been said, this has been the Spur of the Moment podcast. As always, I am Justin. That's the incomparable Jordan. If you would like to get in touch with the show, if you want to send us letters, if you want to
You want to
sponsor the
sponsor
show,
us?
if you want to communicate with the show in any way, all I ask is that you don't get weird. You can email at itsjustinsbusiness at gmail.com. That's itsjustinsbusiness at gmail.com. You can find me on TikTok. I'm at TikTok. I'm at Justin Spurr. TikTok is still kind of a barren wasteland of content right now, but we're trying to stay on there. That's at Justin Spurr. You can check me out there. Where can they find you, Jordan?
I do Minecraft Mondays on Zethgore187 on
Yes.
Twitch.
You can also contact us. You can join our Discord. As always, I will try to put all these links in the description for you to click on. In the meantime, I think I think that will be all, folks, and we will see you